All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's December 9th, 2014 policy session of the Phoenix City Council. We do have a quorum present, and I think more are coming. And so we'll get started with today's agenda. The first item on today's agenda is council information and follow-up requests. Do any members of this City Council would like to provide any information or follow requests? Councilor DeCiccio, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to thank everyone for coming out today. This is our last City Council policy meeting, I believe, until Christmas time, until the new year, until 2015. And for those of you that are out there that are watching this, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Enjoy your families. Be safe over these holidays and enjoy yourselves and enjoy your family. I also want to give a special thanks to our police department, those individuals that are out there every day risking their lives. I want them to know that the City of Phoenix stands behind you. I know this is a very difficult time for you right now, and it's a time for your family. I don't think that it's something that many of us really understand what it would be like to walk out that door every single day, not every other day, but every day that you're at work, and not know if your spouse is going to come home that day. And I know this is very difficult for a lot of people right now, especially for the men and women in blue. And I think we need to give them a special thank you when you see them out there on the street. If you see them at the store, if you see them at the, driving down, honk, say hi, wave at them, and tell them how much you appreciate all that they do for our families. I feel bad today that it turns out that the city is releasing or released the name of that one officer. I think that's incredibly disrespectful. I'm a little upset about that, to say the least. I think we could have held off a little longer. I just found out that it was already released and that we were one of the last to be notified on this thing. We have a police officer that was involved in a shooting, and they've already been told that his home is going to be targeted, which means his personal family is going to be targeted. I don't think that that's right. This police officer did everything right, did everything that he was supposed to do, and everything that he was trained to do. And to endanger someone's family like that without giving it a second thought, I think is just morally wrong and corrupt. So let me get my bearings straight here again. I'm just very upset about what occurred today on this thing. I did send out a release today asking that the city staff look at bringing 2 police officers back to our vehicles. I think that it creates a safer situation, not only for the public, but also for the police officers involved. If you think about it, there is no such thing as an unarmed individual when they get involved into a fight with a police officer. If that unarmed individual puts his hand on that police officer's weapon, he is now armed, and he gets involved in that scuffle. There is no such thing as an unarmed person. And if you have 2 people, 2 officers there at the scene, I think you're going to be less likely to have a violent confrontation with the public, and you're going to be less likely to endanger the police officers too. Right now they're faced with a decision, a simple decision that basically says that if they get involved in a scuffle, and this person may be heavier than them, bigger than them, more agile than them, police officers come in all shapes and sizes, and that person now is facing a life or death situation. Our officer is facing a life or death situation in every instance like that. So to say that people are unarmed is not true. They may not be carrying a weapon, but they have easy access to a weapon when they get involved into a scuffle with a police officer. It could be really simple. Just don't fight our police. It's not that complicated. I also want to give special thanks to an individual. People know that I've got a pretty big email list. We sent out one went out to about 117,000 households. And in my District 6 news and events, we included a paragraph about a group called Duets. Now, Duets is a grandparents who raise grandchildren for whatever reason. The mom and dad are not around, and the grandparents are out there raising the child. And the group was hoping to collect gifts for 125 children this holiday season. After this one individual saw our e-blast on it. He donated $2,000 in gift cards to these grand families. I mean, like, how cool is that? It just reminds me of how generous of a community we live in. Again, for everybody that's out there, remember, even though we're going to be enjoying our Christmas vacations and our Hanukkah time, our religious opportunities, there are going to be people out there on the street protecting our families, and I want to thank everybody for what they do. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Other members of the council, comments or information or announcements? Councilman Williams, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a special presentation today. My office received a complaint of animal neglect and poor conditions on a property in Sunburst Farms concerning about 100 sheep. Detective Smith investigated, coordinated with the Department of Agriculture, and noted that there was no violation. However, it needed attention. She worked with the owner to develop a better relationship in the community, contacted outside organizations to find solutions for the property and animal conditions, and there were few resources to help with so many issues. But the community really come forth on this. The Emergency Animal Clinic offered to help. Becky Stewart organized others and volunteered to help with most of the work. Doris Mern, Heather Taylor, and Pat Levin from the Emergency Animal Clinic also were instrumental in resolving the issues. Over time, the property turned into great shape, and the animals are doing very well. And the neighbors that live in Sunburst called to thank the city for our efforts, but it was really the work of these people who made it all happen. And I congratulate Commander Klima also, because he has been pushing and making sure that animal cases are investigated and how important they are. But I really want to congratulate these people. So would Detective Jemima come down, Becky, Doris, and Pat? And Mayor, would you join me at the podium, because I'd like to give them a certificate of appreciation. And, well, this is for the Emergency Animal Clinic itself. Becky, would you like to take both certificates?
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Pat? She's not here? Okay, and Heather?
From where?
I think from the clinic. And Doris. Doris. Thank you. And I also just learned coming down here, there are 2 people from Sunburst Farms that would like to come up and express their appreciation.
Sure. My name's Steve Kimmel. I'm with the Sunburst Farms Homeowners Association, and we wanted to give this certificate of appreciation to Detective Schmidt for going above and beyond in this case. I think if people understood the degree to which this property was overgrown and the difficulties this lady was having in managing her livestock, was no ordinary situation. So we just wanted to show our appreciation for the outreach and the extra work that she did on behalf of our neighborhood.
Thank you very much for coming down.
All right, other members of the council? Councilman Gates, you have any?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank everyone involved in the City of Phoenix's Pearl Harbor Day walk this Sunday. In particular, Ben Ernie, who's a City of Phoenix employee who just pours his heart and soul into this effort every year. It's wonderful. A walk on Pearl Harbor Day from Cityscape. We did it at Cityscape this year for the first time, all the way down to the World War II Memorial at Wesley Bolin Plaza. Great event, a lot of folks there. Vice Mayor Waring was there, as well as Councilman Gallego and Congressman-elect Gallego, a vet himself. So it was great to see them, and I was really honored to have the opportunity to ride in a pedicab with my grandfather, who's a World War II vet. That's a long ways for him to walk these days, but he's 92 years old, and he was so proud to be a part of that event. And then we went down to the World War II Memorial, where there was a great crowd on hand, and had the honor of placing the wreath for the City of Phoenix at the memorial. So I want to thank everyone involved in that event. Also wanted to thank everyone who came out to our District 3 holiday party last night in Sunny Slope at Let It Roll Bowl. Mayor, thanks for joining us, and after all your trash talk, you actually didn't bowl this year. So I don't know, maybe you worried about, I was wondering about that. He can try and respond to that if he wants to, but you know. No, it was a great event, had a great turnout, and lots of folks who gave toys and donations for Betty's Kids at the Desert View PAC program in Sunny Slope. So really excited about the opportunity to get those toys to the kids so they can enjoy those. And finally, in some sad news, some of you may know that Mayor Driggs is not doing well. I had the opportunity to speak with Senator Driggs this morning, and he was with his father at that time, and the family just wanted to pass on to everyone that he's peaceful right now. He's not in pain, but obviously I told Senator Driggs that all of us are praying for him and thinking about him right now, and thinking about his very, very large legacy to the City of Phoenix. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Thank you for saying that about Mayor Driggs. Not just legacy, what he served as mayor, but what he did in his after he was done being mayor, up to and including just the last few weeks, being such a strong advocate for historic preservation and preservation of important buildings in our community. Other councilors? Councilman Vice Mayor Waring.
Thank you. I was sorry to hear about former Mayor Driggs' travails. I got the same email you did this morning, so it was fresh news to me. I've known him for, I think, at least 15 years, probably more. He's probably hit me up harder than any activist I've ever met in terms of really fighting for the city. It's never stuff about himself. It was always stuff about the city, and I really appreciate that. Have been just knowing him for a long time, and it's really sad to hear that he's not doing as well as we would like. So, on a cheerier note, we are going to have our holiday party on December 16th, so a week from today. If you're watching this live, next Tuesday at 5:30 at Zips Sports Grill, which is basically the intersection on the southeast corner of 64th Street and Greenway Road, and in our district in the northern part of the city. So if you'd like to come, we'd love to have you. We're asking for applesauce cups and pudding cups to give to Kitchen on the Street, which is an active endeavor in neighborhoods in my district to help out those who are in need. Last year, you may remember, if you came, we had books, and it was a great success, so we're hoping for a similar turnout. The food is excellent. So very excited about that, and we appreciate Zips hosting us. Also, it starts at 5:30 again next Tuesday night. We do ask you to bring something, but if you just want to stop by, we'd love to have you. We are also having a meeting, a special meeting, I think, about the FAA. Isn't that next Tuesday afternoon? So that was not on the calendar when we booked this party. So if I'm not there right at 5:30, I apologize. But we'll definitely make sure that the party starts whether I'm there or not. So thank you very much, though. We really appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other council members? Councilman Gallego?
I want to join my colleagues in extending my prayers to the family of Mayor Driggs. He's been a great champion for the city and is currently serving on the Martin Luther King Boulevard Advisory Committee that Councilman Nowakowski and I have to advise us on a Suitable Street to recognize Dr. King, a committee that has recommended Broadway. And we thank that committee for their service and their advice and the research they did into history in Phoenix. I also want to thank my African American Advisory Council for helping me on that project and many others, including a lot of good advice on police recruitment. And I want to thank the Blight Task Force, which recently concluded and has been helping us figure out how we can get blighted properties back onto the market where they can be benefits to the neighborhood and not eyesores. And I'm looking forward to sharing those recommendations with my colleagues. I think it will be a good step forward in helping our economy continue to recover. I want to thank my team for their hard work on landlord-tenant issues. Working with the refugee community is a passion for our office, and we've been involved with several projects. And we owe a congratulations to the prosecutor's office for their largest case in city history on the Woodbridge case, showing that although we are a very, very business-friendly city, when people don't have appropriate standards, we do stand up and say that we want to take good care of our residents. And in this particular case, there are many refugees in the community with really inspiring stories who deserve a safe place to live and to raise their children. So congratulations to Bob Smith for that verdict. Also want to thank Councilman Nowakowski for the successful meeting this morning with smaller businesses and talking about the Super Bowl. We've been spending a lot of time communicating about the benefits and helping people prepare for a safe Super Bowl. And I think we're moving in great directions, got even more ideas now and more action items for our offices to make this a success. My email list is not as large as Councilman DeCiccio, so I don't think I'll get any $2,000 donations, but if people are still looking for places to donate, we have set up a fund at the Community Foundation with Mayor Stanton's help for our flood victims, and if you are going to be making charitable donations and want to help people who are having a hard time getting back into their homes after flooding this summer, we still very much need your help on that. So if you know of anyone else, Councilman DeCiccio, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other members of the council, Councilman Pastor.
When you have a lot of emails like that, you have to manage them. So I just want to say happy holidays. We're getting close. So happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. And what I have to say is on December 17th at Adam Diaz Community Center, we will be having our cookie exchange party and holiday gathering. So anybody that is interested is more than welcome to come, and please bring some cookies so we can exchange. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Any other members of the council? Yeah. Councilman Zoid?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Well, I want to go back. You know, it's been a couple of weeks since we've had Thanksgiving, but I want to give a big thank you to the Maryville Church of Nazarene and other community partners who help organize the Maryville Thanksgiving lunch every year. This year, Commander Kurtenbach, Maryville commander, several Phoenix police officers, community leaders, and strong community leaders like the ones who are in the District 5 office or in the audience. Vanya Gavada and Bithya Ratnasamy spent their Thanksgiving there helping to serve hundreds of families. And so I want to just thank all of you for doing that, especially the District 5 team who continues to just, their hearts are absolutely in the community, and I'm inspired by it every day. I would like to also invite everyone out to the Seed Spot's demo day this evening, 6 p.m., Herberger Theater. Seed Spot, it has been ranked #1 by the Arizona Republic recently as #1 ranked incubator in the state, and they're going to have the 4th demo day there, again, 6 o'clock. It's very exciting. You know, you're going to see lots of entrepreneurs. If you don't know what a demo day is, just think of Shark Tank. And you are going to be inspired by the talent that we have here in Phoenix, and Seed Spot, as well as other accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces, higher education institutions, and of course, the CED staff here and District 5 team. Everyone here at the city, I believe, is doing their part in making Phoenix the place for entrepreneurs. And come on out to the Herberger Theater this evening, and can't help but to just be excited for what is going on. Let me see. Yesterday was a very exciting day for Phoenix. The SkyTrain now travels to Terminal 3, and it actually connects. There's a walkway that connects to Terminal 2. Every terminal is now connected to the SkyTrain, and Mayor Stanton was out and gave some opening remarks there, along with Councilman Gates, and I was honored to be there as well. It's exciting. I think it says 7 to 8 minutes on the way to Terminal 3. I think it was about 7 minutes. Way back was about 8 minutes, but nonetheless, I mean, can you imagine going from 44th Street in Washington to Terminal 3 at the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport in under 10 minutes? So that's exciting. Our city manager at Zerker, as well as, I believe, Tammy Fisher. We have Chad here. I want to thank our aviation staff. This was an undertaking. We wanted to get this done before the Super Bowl. He came in before the deadline, under budget, and that's what people have to, really appreciate. And if you do go out, you will see Arizona reflected all over the place. The public art that is on this place, the flooring and everywhere else, it speaks volumes to the state or to the city staff and the talent that we have there, the artists that you're reaching out to. So thank you so much for doing that. And I believe one more thing. Meet Me Downtown. Meet Me Downtown is a 3 to 5 mile walk or run. We do it every Monday between 5:15 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Come on out to the corner there at Cityscape. Again, every Monday, and we kick this off. This is part of the Fit Phoenix program. We kicked this off a few weeks ago, and it's been doing very well. Large crowds are coming out. The small businesses are really appreciating it. It's promoting community, I think, but as well as economic development and, of course, health. So that's all I have on the list today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman Valenzuela. Councilman Nowakowski.
All right. We just want to let everyone know that we're accepting nominations for Lucky 7 for January. If you have a chance to look on our website, on District 7 website at phoenix.gov, you can nominate your favorite place to eat, your first date, places for families. There's all kinds of different things that you can nominate for Lucky 7. We also had a double feature last Saturday right here at Civic Space. What a great turnout. Over 800 people showed up. We had free hot chocolate, popcorn, and basically a picture with Santa Claus. And the park looked great with all the children and family, and it was pajama night in the park. So everybody was wearing pajamas, so it turned out really, really nice. And I really want to thank Downtown Phoenix Inc. for all the great events and everything that they do downtown Phoenix and partnering up with our office. Also, this last Saturday we had a great event, APS Parade of Lights, where we were out there, and Mel Martin, like always, decorates his cars, and we had the mayor, Bill Gates, and Laura, and myself, and we had our families out there and just greeting. It was the largest light parade since I've been in office for the last 7 years. It was wonderful to see families out there. They were probably about 10 rows deep in watching the parade, and they kind of extended it a couple blocks extra. So I really want to thank APS and all the sponsors, especially our Parks and Rec and our Streets Department, all our city staff that makes that possible. A lot of times we're not able to take our families out to Disneyland or up to Flagstaff to the Snow Bowl, but this light parade is something special, and it's traditions that we've created. Also, I want to thank Cityscape for their third year of having their ice skating ring out there on Central Avenue. If you haven't experienced ice skating down Central Avenue, right here at Cityscape, right between Central and it's Washington and Jefferson, we have an ice skating ring. It's just incredible with the Christmas tree right in the middle, and you'll see people ice skating at 70-degree temperature with shorts. It's amazing. Only in Phoenix you can experience something like that. And also all those great sponsors of sponsoring the Lights Down Central. It's a tradition that when I was growing up, our family used to get into our station wagon and cruise down Central Avenue to look at the lights, and we brought that back, and I just really want to thank all the corporate sponsors of making that possible. Also, the other thing I want to do is this Saturday and Sunday, I want to invite everyone out to the Tamale Festival. We're going to have a Tamale Festival right here in front of City Hall on the streets. It's going to be about 3 city blocks blocked off, and you're going to have about 18 different churches competing on who has the best tamales. And also, Pastor Gonzalez is donating about 5,000 toys, and they're going to have Santa Claus out here on Saturday morning giving out 5,000 toys with some elected officials, and Santa Claus will be out here. So come on down and enjoy that. And once again, I just really want to thank all those small businesses in downtown Phoenix that came down to our meeting on the Super Bowl that Councilman Gallegos and myself sponsored. What a great turnout, some great input, and people are just really excited. We're expecting over 1 million people in downtown Phoenix during that Super Bowl week. We have the Pro Bowl, which is the first time in a community that you're going to have the Pro Bowl and the Super Bowl during that same week. So we're expecting over 1 million people visiting Phoenix. It's a time for us to show off our great city and hopefully keep a lot of those tax revenues here. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you, my colleagues, for making this all possible.
Thank you very much, Councilman. I think everybody had it. All right, let's move on with the rest of our agenda. We have no consent agenda today. Vice Mayor, do we have an executive session?
Mayor, in accordance with the properly posted notice and agenda, I move that the City Council, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 38-4031.02.a, meet an executive session on Tuesday, December 16th, 2014, at 2:30 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of the Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona, and on Tuesday, January 13th, 2015, at 1 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of the Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington, Phoenix, Arizona.
Second.
A motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. Mr. City Manager, do you have any reports or budget updates?
Mayor, I have 2 things today. First, I'll invite our partner from Arizona Forward, Diane Brossart, who is the Executive Director of Arizona Forward, is here, and she would like to recognize some accomplishments that the city has made in the area of environmental sustainability, recognized recently in some awards. Ms. Brossart.
Thank you, City Manager. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to be here. I came to congratulate you because the City of Phoenix did a sweep this year at our Environmental Excellence Awards. It was outstanding. This program has become known as the Academy Awards of the environmental community, and the awards set standards for achieving a balance between the built and natural environment and working towards Arizona's technical, social, and aesthetic development. The City of Phoenix won 4 Crescordia Awards and 6 Awards of Merit, so 10 awards total, which is more than any other Valley community or city statewide. So congratulations from Arizona Forward and our partner presenting the awards, SRP. I thought that you can see the awards on the screen. Fay Gray Recreation Center won a first place award for buildings and structures in the civic category, a wonderful recreation center in Hermosa Park. The Complete Streets Ordinance demonstrates robust support for walkable neighborhoods connected by multiple transportation corridors in the urban core. And one of my personal favorites, Transit 2000, which moved Phoenix from 34th largest transportation system in the country from 28th to 34th. So we're 20, I'm going to get this right. We moved up from 34th to 28, which is really good. And I'm excited because I serve on the Commission for the Future of Phoenix Transportation, and we're looking at the next iteration of transit, and that's a really important issue, and we're excited about making a recommendation to the mayor and council in the coming weeks. The last but certainly not least is Ground Cover Public Art Project, which is really a wonderful piece by local artist Ann Morton that drew international attention by involving blanketeers from 22 states and 2 provinces in Canada. Together they put 300 individual blankets together to create this beautiful lush desert artistic piece, but even more importantly, afterward, all the blankets were given away to the homeless. So it was not only an artistic creation, but served a wonderful purpose. So congratulations, and thank you for the opportunity. I know there's some folks in the room that were instrumental in those projects, so kudos to all of them as well.
Thank you very much, Diane. It was a great event. It is kind of like the Academy Awards, and in City of Phoenix, we're proud to receive so many, and we hope we can be able to compete successfully in years to come. It really is inspiring. I know not just for city employees, but some of the great contractors that we get to work with, they really get recognized for their excellence. I really appreciate your focus in on good, strong sustainability, really motivating excellent sustainability in all the projects that we do, and not just the built environment, but some of the excellent plans that we have as well, and all the winners who may be here. Thank you for your great work on behalf of the people of Phoenix. Thank you, Diane.
Super, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And Mayor, one last thing, I will ask Deputy Fire Chief Elizabeth Hendel to join me up front here. And if I might ask you and Councilman Gates, this is an employee suggestion program for an efficiency. We'll take a picture with the Deputy Chief. She suggested a major change to the mandatory live fire training required by the Federal Aviation Administration. All aircraft rescue firefighters are required to attend this live fire training annually to maintain certification. Over the years, city staff have traveled out of state to attend the live training as required, since Arizona does not have a certified training facility. But Deputy Chief Hendel suggested that the city save money by bringing a mobile prop to the city. Implementation of the suggestion resulted in $244,000 annual savings for overtime and travel, and having this on-site prop added value to our training by allowing our firefighters to train here using their own gear and fire apparatus. I want to thank Deputy Chief Hendel for her suggestion and service to the city.
Mr. Victor Lopez, 25 years of service with the Aviation Department. Victor Lopez began his career with the City of Phoenix in 1988 as a Building Equipment Operator 1 in the Public Works Department. During his career, he has received many promotions, and in 2004, Victor promoted to Aviation Supervisor 3 in the Aviation Department, a position he holds today. In 2003, Victor attended the Management Development Program with the Aviation Department. In 2004, Victor rose to the challenge when aviation needed to create a new work group to maintain the baggage handling system. Victor also attended Southwestern College to pursue his business degree in 2010. Victor's leadership skills and job knowledge are a highly valued asset to the Aviation Department. Congratulations to Victor Lopez for 25 years of excellent customer service to the City of Phoenix.
All right, congratulations and thank you to the service of the people of City of Phoenix. Next item on the agenda is our 2015 legislative agenda.
We can do that, or we could do the vacancy, whichever one you prefer first.
I think we're only going to do 2 items today.
That's correct.
So we should have enough time for both. So let's do state and legislative. Let's keep it on the regular order. I apologize. We're going to switch it around, but I think that's when we had 3 items on today's agenda. So let's do state and legislative, federal legislative agenda. Okay.
Mayor and Council, I'm Tom Remus with the Office of Government Relations. Joining today are John Gonzalez and James Orlowski. We're going to be presenting 2 items today, the proposed state agenda as well as the proposed federal agenda. As background, our office starts the process in early fall where we go out to city departments, meet with them to talk about issues that are important for them to work effectively with the state government or federal government. We ask if there's any needs that they might have, and that could be anything from clarifying a law or advocating for program funding. This year, we interjected something new into the process. We wanted to come to city council subcommittees to allow for additional input from council members as well as the public on our federal program and state program. We were slated to go to 4 council subcommittees. We made it to 2 of them. 2 of them didn't happen, but we were able to provide some reports. Additionally, we made the opportunity available to come and brief any of the council offices and staff to see if there were additional items that perhaps would like to put into our state and federal agenda. Today we're going to start with you by discussing our state agenda. With this item, Mr. Gonzalez will walk us through the 3 proposals that we're going to advocate for. But additionally, I want to talk about another change that we made at council suggestion. That change was adding legislative language to each of the items that we're asking for direction on. These are items that came from city departments. We wanted to make sure that instead of just having a paragraph describing what we were looking for, that we actually gave you proposed draft language. If we get approval from you today, we would then work with finding a state legislator to carry this particular measure and with Leg Council to do any clarification that might be needed. Before John begins, I want to talk about our guiding principles that are our highest priorities in government relations when it comes to our state legislative agenda. Those principles are maintaining and protecting shared revenues. As you know, this is a pot of money that is set aside that includes income tax, sales tax, and vehicle license tax. This particular item makes up 34% of the city general fund, and it's very important for us to protect those funds from any potential sweeps down at the legislature. This agreement was made between the voters and the state back in 1942, and we want to continue to work to keep this process whole. Now, I should clarify that any bill that comes up during this legislative session that deals with perhaps tax cuts, those might have impacts to our shared revenues, but we will make sure to bring each of those bills back before you for your direction with the potential impact to the city budget, just to make sure you see the complete picture. Our second important guiding principle is opposing any unfunded mandates. Again, this is just making sure that items aren't pushed down to the local level that we would have to pay for unexpectedly. Our third item is preserving local authority. And then our last item is something new this year. This guiding principle was discussed at the October 21st policy session where you had an in-depth discussion on water policy. What we're asking for here is the ability to protect water resources. And what that means is to make sure that the city is very involved in any water resource discussions at the Capitol in such items as protecting our groundwater rights. Water is going to be an increasingly important issue down at the state, and we want to make sure that we have that ability to weigh in with the city position. With that, Mayor, I'd like to turn it over to John, and he'll walk through the couple items that would ask for
Are you asking for a vote on those guiding principles? I know we've done that in years past, but you feel like you've got direction from this council as to those, that being our guiding principles?
We would like that to be part of a motion, yes, to give us direction to be involved with these issues as they arise at the state
So
capitol.
whoever on this council decides to make a motion at the appropriate time, we decide whether we want to do a separate motion on guiding principles, separate and apart from a specific piece of legislation, but we'll hold that decision to a later time. But just, since we added an item to protecting water resources, we probably do need a specific vote of this council. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. John?
Let me talk about the several items under the subject of aviation. Sky Harbor staff has been working with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office since this summer, looking at ways to improve security at the airport and the area of any kind of breach of areas, critical infrastructure areas, trespassing. And what they have come up with in their discussions is the potential to increase the current penalty. Right now, for trespassing at a critical infrastructure facility, that is a Class 6 felony. However, the county attorney's office is in agreement that that needs to probably be increased, and they are very supportive of going to a Class 4 felony. What does that mean? That means that the person who is trespassing at critical areas of Sky Harbor, instead of receiving potentially a 6-month to 1-year prison sentence, could see as much to 1.5 years to 3 years in prison time. And so that is an item that has been brought up by Sky Harbor as well as with the county attorney's office. In the next item, in the area of public safety, the police chief has been meeting with city staff, government relations, city manager's office, talking about an idea of how to address people who are persons who are intoxicated in public, whether it be through drugs or alcohol. Now, this is an item that is prohibited by state law under the city ordinance. We are prohibited from having city ordinances on public intoxication. So since this has been attempted before at the state legislature, it's never been done this way. If we're going to have a discussion of how to deal with this population, the idea is to create a legislative ad hoc committee, which would consist of law enforcement, public defenders, social workers, the homeless community, to have a discussion next year on what are the best practices and best ways to try to deal with this population, and then see what comes out of that conversation next year. So that is another item for you to consider. In the area of neighborhoods, the city's graffiti anti-task force, which actually is chaired by Councilwoman Gallego and Councilman Nowakowski, have been holding citizen-led meetings on what are the best ways to deal with this issue, some of the ways. One of the most recent discussions that occurred by this group is the idea of taking the current Phoenix ordinance on graffiti and modifying it to fit a statewide law that would prohibit minors from carrying graffiti implements similar to Phoenix's ordinance, and would also prohibit minors from purchasing these graffiti implements without parental approval, guardian approval, again, similar to City of Phoenix. So that is an item that's come from the task force and is before you for approval. And then finally, in the area of state funding, another item, as we discussed before, revenue sharing is definitely important, but there's other funds to consider, and these are some of the funds that we are definitely monitoring. Highway user revenue funds, which are very, very important for street maintenance, street construction. Those funds are definitely, we're going to ensure that any attempts to cut those funds any further are brought to your attention. The Arizona Department of Water Resources and the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, those are critical areas that the city as well as the business community receives a lot of benefit from in the area of licensing and regulation. So any cuts to those departments would be very problematic, and we would definitely keep an eye on that. And finally, just general public safety funds. For example, whether it's the Arizona Center Terrorism Information Center, whether it's the Arizona State Hospital, which security is definitely an important subject matter in the surrounding neighborhoods, or whether it's other relationships we have with the state that impact police and fire. Definitely any of those funds that get impacted, we definitely want to bring that to your attention as we move forward. And with that, that is the state agenda.
All right, before we go to members of the council, Craig Tripkin is here. I'd like to provide testimony to this council relative to our proposed state agenda. Councilman, good to see you. Thanks for being here. You're there, and that's all right. the same building when you were on council, but a different route to the microphone.
That's right, I'm learning. Mayor, thank you, Mayor, Council, thank you, and thank you to your legislative staff and Lisa Takata for what you've put together. I'm here to talk briefly about the Public Intoxication Study Committee. CAS, Central Arizona Shelter Services, is the single largest provider of homeless services within the state. This population, the intoxicated population, I say that with a smile, is really in our wheelhouse in terms of what services we provide. We serve about 1,100 people a night, 600 of whom are in what might be called a low-demand shelter, which is, to some of you, is known as the men's overflow shelter in the parking lot area. And that really is even the more targeted population that you're looking at. I'm here to, I guess, support this, but I also ask that the city support that we be the homeless provider that the speaker selects, and that the city supports that, because I think, again, this is in our wheelhouse. We are the single largest single adult provider in the state. And I might add, with the pending closing of the men's overflow shelter and the parking lot, where we serve about 600 people a night in this low-demand environment, some of those people, and we can question what percentage of those people, but some percentage of those people are going to be, may not have a place to stay. We would like to see alternatives that come up that provide places to stay for those people. In the end, I personally believe that another low-demand shelter is going to be a piece of the answer. Again, I would like to ask the city to support that we be the provider, the homeless provider that the speaker chooses. And I know you can't control the speaker, but we certainly appreciate your advocacy. I might add, just on the legislative agenda, we are in Washington frequently, and I support the housing stuff that they're talking about. Thank you.
Very much on the federal side. Thank you. Okay, Councilman, so it's duly noted that you would like, if we get a motion in favor of the state legislative agenda, that we request that CAS be the chosen entity at the table. I think that's a fair request. Okay. Now I'll turn to members of this council. Questions about our state legislative agenda? Vice Mayor.
So I assume we can ask questions about the entire agenda, or do you want to start point by point?
It's up to you. Well, as long as it's state agenda.
I was going to follow up on the one he was just talking about.
Please.
But then, okay. So the public safety. So I did a couple ride-alongs this year. It's not everybody, so that's overstated, but a high percentage of people who were contacted, both of these were at night. There's more activity. You get, for better or worse, a flavor of kind of what's going on out there. A lot of the people that were contacted by the officers I rode along with were inebriated, and by inebriated, it seemed like the predominant drugs of choice were heroin and methamphetamine. So they're not just inebriated. I mean, one of them allegedly shot at just a guy taking out his garbage. There was a chase through the park. I mean, it was more like something you'd see on a TV show. And it was really, it's scary circumstances for people who are encountering these individuals. But then there were some others who, they had definitely been using drugs recently. They would pretty much confess that they were high then. Certainly not implying the officers were lenient or doing anything wrong, but kind of what's the standard, or you try to come up with a standard on this impairment? Because, I mean, this isn't like they had a few beers even and they're walking home. I mean, they shot heroin within the last hour, and now we're contacting them, me being in the officer's car, as you see them kind of roaming down the street in the middle of the night.
All right, I appreciate that very much. But this team may not be the appropriate team to ask that question for. I don't know if anybody's here.
I mean, I see officers in the audience. I guess I assumed they knew what the standard would, or what the kind of status quo would be now.
Mayor and Vice Mayor, I could just say that that is a very good question, and that has been one of the issues. In the last 5 years, there have been several attempts to introduce legislation on this particular item, and one of the several problems with that legislation is trying to develop that standard or idea, and that's why the legislation has failed. Thus the reason why the police chief, knowing the history, knowing what has been attempted, Representative, now Senator Sylvia Allen, who's coming back to the legislature, was one of those champions of that issue, tried to work in a collaborative effort with folks, just didn't get there. So I guess the answer is the standards are something that is definitely a question, and that's the reason why we need a lot of people in the room to start having this long discussion. It's never really taken place of how do we get there, if at all.
So there have been bills in the past that failed, though, specific bills.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, that is correct.
All right, so now because of that, you're having everybody get together and sort of discuss it. Because, I mean, just one ride along, I mean, anybody who wants to do it, we can try to set it up for you. You know, it's definitely a public policy problem for sure, just for the safety of the individuals being so impaired and really just roaming around out in the street. I mean, they're easy targets for other predators. I mean, it's not a good situation, and it's shocking when you're not used to seeing it, how much of that is out there. So I do applaud the merits of working on this. It sounds like we just don't have a definitive answer of what the bill is going to look like, and when we do, you're going to bring the bill back to us, right, and then we'll vote on whether to support it or not.
Mayor, council members, by your direction today to allow us to move forward, we would then go meet with the bill sponsor, work with Ledge Council, and we would bring back that final bill back to you. But you're giving authority today for us to move forward in that development.
Because I didn't hear you asking us or providing really direction to us on recommendations of what you should say. So you're more in a listening capacity and feedback that we're interested in this issue. Is that a fair way to categorize what we're voting on today?
What you're voting on today, Vice Mayor, would be to authorize us to find a sponsor for this bill, and this would be a city staff recommendation, is to create an ad hoc committee. But we would bring back a final version of the bill to you so you could see exactly what was in it.
So the bill wouldn't actually be, the bill would just be to create a committee to study it. It wouldn't be an actual recommendation for a bill. Is that?
What we would hope that the ad hoc committee, Mayor, Vice Mayor, I think we would hope that the ad hoc committee would have a recommendation on legislative language that would have consensus among those stakeholders from the ad hoc committee.
And then the idea would be the bill would be next year.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, that is correct.
All right, other questions? Council, Vice Mayor, any more?
I do, if you don't mind, if I move on to another one of these
Jump in.
points.
Yep.
The graffiti bill. So last year there was a graffiti bill, and what happened to it? I'm sorry, I had to step out for a minute to.
Mayor and Vice Mayor, what happened was that the bill did not advance. There was a lot of discussion about that bill. One of the things that came out of it was that there were actual representatives of the city's anti-graffiti task force in the several meetings that we had at the Capitol that heard firsthand from whether it was the county attorney's office, probation department, and other folks as to their concerns of what that version looked like. That was a very positive educational moment, and as a result, over the summer, the anti-graffiti task forces continued to meet, and as recently as last month, actually the last 2 months, but as recently as last month, definitely this issue was discussed with that task force chaired by Councilman Nowakowski and Councilwoman Gallego. And so the idea so far in 2 meetings has been reaffirmed to take the current Phoenix ordinance and modify that so that it can be applied statewide, which again, the provisions would be that minors would be prohibited from, similar to Phoenix ordinance, prohibited from having graffiti implements unless without the permission of a guardian or adult, parent or guardian, and also that retailers would have to check ID before, if somebody looked like a minor without a parent, they would have to check ID to make sure they're not selling these graffiti implements. Unlike the past where the legislation has required lockup, it's kind of moved to a new place where it's just checking ID to make sure they're not selling to minors. Again, a lot of it was discussed at the task force, and it's taking a hybrid of the Phoenix ordinance.
So I think last year I expressed concerns about whether this would pass the way it was written, and it sounds like it didn't. Did you mention the county attorney? You had a kind of a list of people who had expressed concerns. The county attorney was one of them?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, a list of people we had in the room: the county attorney's office, the county probation department, the administrative office of the courts.
So you're not going to move forward until those people are satisfied this year? Is that?
Mayor and Vice Mayor, it has to be a collaborative effort if it's going to move forward, especially
if you move forward on a
judicial
bill like
committee.
that at the legislature and the county attorney's against it or something, you're not going to get very far.
Well,
So-
Mayor and Vice
but
Mayor,
you've
it's very-
addressed that.
Mayor and Vice Mayor, yes, we will take that in consideration, and it's good to see that the county attorney's office actually has been attending these recent task force meetings as well, giving input on what the committee's been discussing.
Thank you.
Right, other members of the council? Councilman Gallego, and then Councilman Gallego, and then Councilman DeCiccio.
I want to thank you for your hard work on this and for the many late nights on graffiti and other proposals that we've been developing. I think it will put Phoenix in a good light moving forward, and I'm glad that we also included funding for the state services that are in the city of Phoenix, including the state hospital. This is great news for District 8 and I think for the entire city. I've been part of a variety of conversations on issues related to law enforcement and My Brother's Keeper, which is the national initiative to improve outcomes for men of color. And one of the items that has come up is voting rights and restoring rights for folks who have lost them. Several bills were introduced last session, including one by the speaker-elect on this particular issue. And I think could be a good sign for us in our community as we work to improve dialogues and outcomes. So I was hoping this is something that we could monitor, and if it does move forward, I'd like us to participate.
Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, we will definitely bring forward those bills of interest back to you. As a standard practice over the years, government relations is on each policy agenda. Usually it starts off with a great number of introduced bills that have potential to move forward, that impact the city. As we get further along, that list dwindles down a bit. But once we understand all of the issues of concern by members of the council, we'll make sure to include those as part of our packet that we bring forward to you.
Wonderful. And if there is an opportunity, Councilman DeCiccio and I had spoken earlier about parklets and looking at the state liquor laws surrounding that. I think a much lower priority than state shared revenues, protecting HERF funds, but if you do see an opportunity, that was something where we're trying to have a more vibrant urban downtown, and we saw an opportunity in that area.
Councilman DeCiccio?
Thank you, Mayor. And following what Councilwoman Gallego had mentioned, I think it's kind of important too. I mean, I think it fits in line with wanting to move the city of Phoenix forward. And you look at some of these laws; they aren't created for this new wave of ideas that are impacting our city. So as you're looking at that, I would this is really something that Councilwoman Gallego really wanted to push to the subcommittee. She did a fantastic job on these parklets. I mean, like an amazing job on it. Is to really take a look at this and find out what we can do to really improve it and to make it easier for people to be able to get a liquor license if they're going to be doing that. And I can't imagine that getting stopped, but I would strongly recommend you look at creating some legislation now, and then shortly be passed subcommittee, and I think it passed the council as well. So find out ways to make it easier for us. The second thing, when it comes to HERF funding, for years, the last few years at least, those monies have been taken away, which means less money for infrastructure, less money for streets, for not just for Phoenix, but for cities throughout the state of Arizona. Let's look at finding ways to really protect those funds, those infrastructure dollars. Those infrastructure dollars are critical, long-term vibrancy of the city. The other deals with, and following, I thought it was kind of ironic, the city of Phoenix wants to now impose its own model on other cities throughout the entire state. I thought we believed in self-determination, but it's good to see the hypocrisy goes on both sides of the aisle here. I never thought that Phoenix would be out there wanting to push an agenda on other cities if they haven't agreed to do it themselves, but hey, if that's what you're looking to do, I like some of the ideas you came up with, but don't criticize others when it's on the other side of it either. The other deals with the tax policy of this. In the past, I think there were some of the things that the city of Phoenix has pushed forward were basically anti-taxpayer, ones that hardworking taxpayers would end up getting basically the short end of the stick here. I would hope that before we engage in any negotiations, any discussion, especially when it comes to the simplification of the tax code, when we're dealing with the TPT, and that was very contentious, and you had a very divided council, but you had no direction to go in there and actually negotiate something. That no negotiations, like clear negotiations. It's okay to sit in a room and listen, but remember, it's the council that decides the policy. It's the council that determines whether or not you should be in there negotiating one way or the other. So as you look forward on this, make sure that you always get council approval. A blanket statement doesn't really cut it, and we saw that happen last year, and I think that you really did a much better job last year than we'd seen in previous years. Matter of fact, you moved miles, I think, in doing that, but make sure that you get our approval moving forward, even if, not, you know, I think some of these things I'm going to be on the winning side of it, and some things I'm going to be on the losing side, but at the very end, you have a direction from the city, elected body, telling you what to and what not to negotiate in certain bills. And so if you can make sure you do that and keep in line with what we did last year and, you know, improve on that, I think that'd be fantastic. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Williams, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, with all due respect, I felt last year many times that we had tied your hands. It worked very well in the beginning, but when things began rolling towards the end of the session, you didn't act like you had the authority to continue to pursue some of the things that we had named as a priority. So I am assuming from what we were presented with today that these are your guiding principles and that you will participate as you go forward. You will keep us advised. If there was a change in direction, you would come to us and get approval. But as long as you are headed in the direction that you are given, you would be able to negotiate and follow through on that. Am I correct?
Mayor, Councilwoman Williams, we follow the direction of this 9-member council, yes.
I know you do, but I just don't want your hands tied when things get very critical. And I know there are some really hot topics this year, and the state is facing funding crisis as well as the city has some challenges. And I just want to make sure as this legislation goes through that you are in the room, you are able to speak out for the city of Phoenix, whether you have given us the precise details or not, that conceptually, and you have been given the approval to proceed down a path. And I just want to make sure you're able to hang in there and really state our position. Okay. Also, Mayor, I think this is a very important session that's going to be coming up. There are so many big issues that the state is going to be facing. It isn't just the funding we hear about, the educational challenge funding, but I know water has become a huge issue. And I don't know if the same person will be at the DWR or if it will be a new person, but in some ways the city is restricted in really participating in that. And on the other hand, we're very well situated to give them our expertise and let them know that we support the principles that keep the water flowing into this state, as well as the pumping requirements. And there's some standards that will probably be set within this next year internally within the state, as well as negotiated with the feds. And I want to make sure that we keep apprised very closely of those, stay on top of that. I think it's critical to us, not today, but 20, 30, 40 years from now, if we want to make sure our grandkids all have a supply of water, good, clean water, that we stay on top of it now rather than in the future. I am pleased with what you have, but I hope we are not limited to just what you presented today. We will have opportunities to engage in other bills. I know you know I'm referring to a couple of the animal abuse bills that we had last year that I know Kate Brophy-McGee are going to be involved. She and Heather be involved in sponsoring and really pushing. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilwoman Williams, that is correct. I think we took a very restrained approach this year in bringing the state agenda to you. We want to partner with members of the legislature on bills of interest that this council would be interested in getting behind. So as the members of the legislature are moving forward with some of their bills, such as the animal cruelty bills, we will definitely be bringing those bills back to you for your direction on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman Williams. The plan is to have legislative agenda on each of the policy sessions during the session. That way, as bills come up and you're able to bring it back for specific direction, you have a chance to do so. You use your good judgment about whether or not you have enough time to get before this council. But although there was a lot of discussion of it last year, the ultimate decision was, If they have time to bring it back for this council to get specific direction, they should. But if they don't have time, particularly at the end of the legislative session, they were not in any way stopped from using their good discretion based upon the principles to push forward with policies consistent with those overall principles adopted by this council. So that was the policy. So long as I've been involved in the council, that's always been the policy relative to our legislative team. That did not change in any regard last year. There was a lot of discussion on the issue, but the substantive policy did not change in any regard. Other questions or comments by members of this council? Councilman Gates? Thank you, Mayor.
First of all, thanks to staff for providing specific draft ordinance, statutes, I thought that was very helpful to give clarity. I know that that's been raised before by some of my colleagues, and I may have raised it as well, so thank you. I assume then, if those bills move forward and they have different language, you're going to come back and, well, you know, these changes were proposed by the parties we've been working with before you continue to move forward with that new language.
Mayor, Councilman Gates, that is correct.
And then the other thing, and just to follow up on the comment that Councilman DeCiccio made about transportation funding, I was just in a meeting this morning with someone from the streets department, and they told me we've spent $6 million already out of our streets budget just repairing roads that have been damaged in the floods and the rains of this year. So to me, that really puts an underline and exclamation point to that fact. Not only should we not be losing funds, but also I think that point needs to be made that this area, the city of Phoenix and the valley in general, took a disproportionate burden from these storms. So all these other projects that we were going to work on in all of our districts are now being pushed off because of addressing the storm damage. So that's something too I think that we need to keep in mind, especially with those legislators who represent these areas of Phoenix that were disproportionately impacted by the storms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Although in fairness, we hope to get reimbursed for a chunk of it based upon the disaster declaration that Councilwoman Gallego was able to lead this council and receive. I know it takes too long, though, to get the actual dollars. All right, other members of the council, Councilman Nowakowski?
I just want to echo Councilmember Williams that we really need to trust you all. Once we give you that guiding point, what we want, and the agenda, I think that bills change every day, and it's kind of hard to bring back those issues to the council, but as long as it's in that parameter that we okay today, I think that it's all right for you to all just go for it and push it through, and I'd like to thank you for all your efforts last year, and hopefully this year will be a better year for the city of Phoenix.
Thank you very much. Councilman DeCiccio, do you have additional comments?
Well, I guess I could, but I mean, I'd kind of like to read it before we vote on it, so if that's at all possible. You know, whatever it is you're going to be sponsoring or pushing forward and negotiating. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from the council is they want to make sure they give you clear direction on each of these different bills. I'm hoping it's not this general blanket policy that we don't have an opportunity to read what it is you're going to be working on. At least that's what I'm hearing. I mean, for example, like, how would you handle this case here then? There's going to be a cut in HERF funds, or even, let's say, state shared revenues, but the state wants to impose a brand new property tax. How would you negotiate that? We've already got clear direction not to cut HERF funds, and you've got clear direction not to cut state shared revenues. So how would you negotiate that? What would you do?
Mayor, council members, I feel like I'm in a interview panel here, but
well, you are.
I think what would definitely do is make sure that if there were opportunities to come back and sit down with the entire body and get direction, we would do that. If this were a circumstance that was at the last day of the legislative session on sine die, we would weigh all of those competing interests, look at what the definite financial impacts are to the city of Phoenix budget, look at the direction that we've received on some of these areas, and make the best decision there. A lot of times, as you know, when you're working with the legislature and external stakeholders, there's a lot of different factors at play, and the issues, there's sometimes when there are trade-offs being made. So, but we would definitely be in constant communication with the mayor and council on that.
I think that's fair. I mean, rarely is that going to happen like that. Well, no, not rarely. It can happen on sine die. But the the fact of the matter is, you would have already had clear direction as this bill would have proceeded. Even if it died and then came back as a striker, you would still have had some direction ahead of time. The idea, the concern that I would have is you're out there negotiating something without clear direction on anything, and none of us having read it. You know, we can't give you direction. We can give you clear basic principles, but that doesn't give you direction on any specific bill, because like anything else, the devil's in the details. What may sound good, at the end of the day, may not be good. So just because a heading of a bill sounds good and a direction of a bill sounds good doesn't mean that it is good for citizens of Phoenix. I'm not hearing too much of a change of what we wanted from last, at least from what this is. I mean, if there's going to be a dramatic change and we're giving you direction to go out there and do it without our, reading it or approval, then I want to hear that in a motion. Then I can vote against it. But, the direction we're in right now is the same direction we were in last year. And if it stays in that same direction, I'll vote for it. If it doesn't, I won't.
All right, that's great. I'm confused as to how that direction is different than it's the same policy we've always had as long as I've been on the council, which is our professional intergovernmental affairs team. If they're able to come back, we do have a scheduled meeting, they're able to come back and get specific approval, they do so. But if not, they use their discretion based upon the general principles that we have provided them. That was as long as I've been involved in leadership here at the city, that's always been the way we have guided and directed this staff. I don't think that changed last year, and I don't think we're hearing a change this year. Any other comments, Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. I would refer to Councilman DeCicio's spot-on comments earlier about the graffiti. It is one of our things at the top of page 2 is local authority, and then here we are trying to impose our ideas on the rest of the state, which is almost comical to me. But also, most of these things, if you take them with paint them with a broad brush, sound great. Local authority sounds great, and it is. We have a charter, et cetera. But when you look at the practical outcome, like in something with consolidated elections, several of us supported consolidated elections that passed the legislature, got thrown out for Phoenix and Tucson in court. But it is a little frustrating. The end result of that is we actually pay more for our elections, about $500,000 a pop more, to have a lot fewer people participate in elections. And I guess as a whole, we're claiming that makes a lot of sense and is good policy. I don't see it. So I guess I don't know how we're going to move through this document, given that we had 3, or depending on how you look at it, maybe 4 areas where we have specific ideas. Are we voting, what's the motion going to be? I guess I'll just ask that.
Well, if you're not going to make it, I'll look to somebody else to make a motion. You decide.
I'm not going to
whether you
make
wanna
it
vote
for a blanket thing. Are we doing it kind of point by point? Because they're not numbered the same. They don't.
So we have the way we voted on the legislative agenda, at least since I've been mayor, has been almost a case-by-case basis, no consistency. So if someone wants to make a motion on the entire agenda, we can, and then each individual council member can decide whether they want to vote it, or if we want to take it and peel it off and vote on shared revenue, unfunded mandates. The public, I don't mind, as long as we get through as quickly as possible, because we do have a lot of other items on, or the federal agenda, plus a very important item relative to our budget and positions in the city. Councilman Williams, do you have a motion?
I would make the motion that we approve staff's recommendations and their guiding principles to move forward to take them into the legislative session.
Okay, so the motion was on the guiding principles. Is that right? We'll start there?
And staff's recommendations for the priorities.
Okay, so the motion was both on the guiding principles plus the proposed state legislative agenda. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Pastor?
I just wanted to make a friendly amendment in the sense of being updated. I don't know if it's once a week or bi-weekly, but to be, as things move very quickly in the legislature, just to be aware of what's moving and how it's moving. I just need information.
So as I stated earlier, I'll make sure it's clear. The plan is to have a legislative update on each and every policy session. Now, that won't be weekly, but generally it's been bi-weekly. We can do more if this body so chooses. We can meet more often in policy session, but at the very least, it would be on each policy session for this body, for the legislative team to come back before us and give us status updates on bills we've already supported, proposed bills that they want us to support, proposed bills they want us to oppose, and then we can bring items forward about that we want to add or subtract from our legislative agenda. So we would do it on each of our policy meetings.
So policy meets every other week, and sometimes it's staggered depending on our calendars and everything else. I just want, because it moves so quickly and things change so rapidly, I just need a little quick note, boom, 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 these are happening.
The challenge we have is that we're going to give direction to them
Okay.
as a body. We have to be in a formal meeting. They can certainly take individual input and they'll take note of it. But if we're going to give them the direction as a body that I think that we're asking for them to do, the only way to do that is in a formal meeting of this council, either in policy or in formal. We can't kind of do it on the side. We've got to do it in a publicly noticed meeting.
I don't think I'm asking on the side. I'm just asking to be informed and updated in the sense, and I think with this, what I mean by this is with this motion, we are falling within the guidelines. We also are giving you direction. With that direction, I just need to be updated.
Mayor,
Tom, I'm sorry.
Mayor,
Tom
Councilwoman Pastor, I will commit that our office will communicate regularly via email or memos to all council offices on a regular basis, knowing that this body doesn't meet and vote. So we'll make sure weekly, bi-weekly, on a regular basis, we share information with you so you know what's happening at the state capitol.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. To that point, by voting just sort of these blanket policies, I mean, you are giving away some of your power to them. They're going to go do what they want to do. I've had complaints, and I'm not criticizing the staff, but I've had complaints from the governor's office, and I've had complaints from legislators about what our guys are doing on our behalf. I think other members can speak for themselves, but I know I'm not the only one who's been in this situation where they look at the vote down here and they're surprised that city representatives are taking positions that we either haven't voted on or we hadn't given specific direction. Now, to the mayor's point, you know, he'll say, we didn't have time, they didn't have time to come back and talk to you and so forth. I would rather err on the conservative side of caution and not have, no pun intended, you're smiling. I knew that would get you, I knew it would. You know, I'd rather have them do less than do more, since we are all capable of calling the legislators either from our areas who represent the city. Any legislator would probably, frankly, take our call. If you want to weigh in, you certainly can if you feel that strongly on something. If you don't feel that strongly on something, and maybe none of us do, then why are we giving them this blanket power? That doesn't make any sense to me. But I have definitely received feedback in the past. You know, we have to work with these people, so, you know, antagonize them, I guess, at your peril as well. But it's not even you doing it or me doing it. It's somebody doing it on our behalf that you don't even necessarily know about, we haven't even briefed about. That's been my whole issue with this, the 3+ years I've been on the council. It's extremely frustrating. I think we should be doing more of this lobbying activity, if you will, on our own. I went down, spoke at a committee about the human trafficking thing, for example, you know, or signed in, certainly, to express my support. It's just, it speaks to, I think, kind of where we're at with this process. We don't all agree on everything, but I do think we're capable of expressing our own opinions, and that's what we should be doing rather than giving that power away to somebody else, which is really giving away the power of our constituents, I might add, to somebody else, and I don't really care for it. So if I represent my constituents and they want to vote me out as a result, then fine, but I don't like giving that away to somebody that they've never even heard of. No offense, fellas.
All right, thank you very much. Just wanted, Councilman Pastor, do you have other things? So the motion is to support staff recommendation. There was a second. The friendly suggestion was that, and I think it was more direction to staff, is to communicate more often with the elected body about legislative. That's, you know, the legislative agenda is a big one, so there's going to be, as the thing moves, there's going to be a lot of changes. But if individual council members want to get more regular briefings, they ought to get it. But then obviously we're going to vote only when we appear in a publicly noticed meeting. Vice Mayor, you have more?
Can I also make a friendly, I guess, directly to the I'm not sure, what was the friendly amendment? I mean, specifically, are we going to have extra meetings to get briefs?
No, I think it was more direction of communicate more individually with the council members, give them updates on what's happening with our legislative agenda and bills that might affect the city. I think that was the request by Councilman Pastor, and I think it's a good request.
That's good. That's a good request. I had a more specific, just procedural thing for this vote. Could we separate out the first part and then the 4 bullet points: aviation, public safety, and neighborhoods? and state funding, could those be done on a one-on-one?
Well, it's up to the motion maker at this point.
Well, I mean, can I make another friendly motion since there's already been one made?
All right, you either,
Good motion.
well, the
I
substitute
do a
motion
substitute
is,
to the friendly? I knew you'd
Make
like
up your
that,
mind.
Steve.
the request is that we vote on the overall
I don't
guiding principles separately. And the answer was, I don't care. Okay, so the motion
Before-
is, at
before he
least
does that, oh.
temporarily then, that we vote on the guiding principles for this council. Go back to that screen so we can see the guiding principles on the screen, please. Protect state share revenue, oppose unfunded mandates, preserving local authority, and then we added this year for a new guiding principle for the city, protecting water resources. We have a motion on that. I assume the seconder was
Mayor.
okay with the change. Thumbs up. Councilman DeCiccio.
I think just as guiding principles are fine, it's what happens after, and that's what I want to make sure we're clear on. Guiding principles are all good. I like the idea of preserving local authority. Is that just Phoenix local authority, or is that city, I mean, all cities throughout the state? I'm just kind of curious what you mean by that.
Mayor, council member, it's this body voting on protecting the city of Phoenix's local authority.
So that means we can impose our will on other cities like the paint legislation, right? It's okay to do that. It's a yes or no.
Mayor, council, it's the discretion of this nine-member committee if which direction you wish to move.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to hear. It's what direction it's here. So I'm okay with just that, Mayor.
That's
It
excellent.
goes back to, again, I want to read exactly what it is I'm going to be voting on. I want to read it. I want to know it. I want to know what the impact is going to be. I don't want to give power to you to make that decision for taxpayers because I'm the one that's ultimately responsible for that. So at the end of the day, as long as we proceed with what we did last year, because I'm hearing that we may not want to do what occurred last year, I'll be fine with it. So I want to make sure I hear it up here. Are we going to be the ones making the determination where the citizens can come back to us and say, you voted for that or you didn't vote for that? I want to make sure I understand that, because that happened with the TPT, where we were a divided council on it, and staff had no clear direction to go in there and negotiate. Like what Councilman Waring was saying, we had heard complaints from the governor's office, we heard complaints from some legislators, that staff was overstepping their bounds and their authority. And I want to make sure that that does not happen. Are we good with that? Staff?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't even know what the question is, to be perfectly frank.
Well, just don't overstep anything we don't vote on.
So the request is that our professional staff don't overstep their bounds.
That we don't vote on and give them
All right.
direction on.
Okay. Maybe we should vote on the issues that were brought up, because there seems to be a discrepancy about the understanding of what direction we're giving that, about when staff can act in consistent with the guiding principles if they don't have specific direction from this council. If we need to vote to do that, to give them that discretion when they don't have time to come back before this body, we ought to do it. I don't want to leave this meeting with there to be confusion, purposeful or not. I don't want there to be confusion on that issue. Vice Mayor.
Well, I think in Councilman DeCicco's case, and first, what I had heard wasn't necessarily just last year or just that bill, but that was one example. Okay. Well, part of it was, we actually had a vote last year that I believe was 4-4, pretty definitive. We didn't take a position. The complaint was that staff was taking a position, making 4 of us happy and I guess 4 of us not happy. And that wasn't acceptable to us because there we actually had a vote. It wasn't even beyond ambiguity. We had a vote to do nothing, sit and listen patiently, and there were complaints that that's not what was happening.
Okay, so we have a motion on the guiding principles. We have a second on the guiding principles.
And homeless.
All in favor of these being our guiding principles for this legislative session, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so that item passes unanimously. Councilman Williams, I'm going to leave it to your discretion about whether you think there's enough confusion on the issue of the discretion that our professional staff has when we don't have the opportunity to come back. It seems like a couple council members are suggesting that if there is a bill or something happened in the legislature which we don't have time to come back, that our professional staff not be able to act in that regard. I believe that what you were saying is that we should give them specific direction that if they don't have time to come back before this body, that they have the discretion to act. And I feel like there is definitely an inconsistency here on this body about, you know, what direction we feel like we're giving them. I feel like they can't walk out of this meeting without knowing the answer to that question. Vice Mayor Diamond?
I guess I do. I guess
Come on.
just,
Okay.
I don't feel like I want them to guess what I might want or what my constituents want.
I think your position is well stated on this issue. I think everyone knows how strongly you feel about this, and I respect your opinion. I don't think you're in the majority personally, but I respect your opinion. I think the position's been well stated. I happen to believe that we vote on these bills as they come before us, but things happen at the legislature and they happen quick, and we are going to hurt the people that we represent if we don't allow our legislative team to take swift action, set up meetings as they need to, give the opinion based upon their experience, based on not only our guiding principles, but our longstanding history on some of these bills. A lot of these issues come back and forth, that we will be hurting our constituents if we don't do that. And I feel like we might need an actual vote on that, because I don't want to leave this meeting with there to be confusion on that issue. Councilman, do you have a feeling on that, Councilman Williams?
Actually, I think you just stated very well what I was trying to explain earlier. I just feel we have the guiding principles. There are times when we need to trust you to go and follow through that maximize the benefits to the city of Phoenix. Now, we might not all agree up here, but hopefully, up until that point happens, we have been informed either formally at a policy meeting or via email, because we're pretty good at responding if it's something that's crazy, and communicating amongst one another if we feel like you're way out of the box. So I am very comfortable with the original motion.
Well, didn't we already?
Okay. We voted on those being the guiding principles. I think
You were
the
asking
issue.
for another motion. I'd like to make one if that's on the same subject that you were talking about with her.
Yeah, the issue is, I'm feeling that there's confusion being created here, and we don't want our professional staff leaving this meeting with there not to be clarity on this issue. It's an issue we've dealt with before. We dealt with it we had long debates about it last year, and there was.
Can I make a motion that might be clear, and then we can have a vote?
Sure.
I mean, since you asked for one. I wasn't going to do this, but I guess my motion would be staff can take positions when we give them clear direction through a vote. And you bring lists of bills to us, so we take lots of positions on lots of issues. I think too many, but we do it. I guess I'd rather see us, if you don't have clear direction from us, then you sit and you watch at the meetings, at the stakeholder meetings, you refer to them. Having served the legislature, I kind of know how this goes. People get together and they discuss the bills, and then you take a position. Just something, you sit, you observe, you come back to us. If there's time for us to weigh in, fantastic. If there's not, there's not. But that in the absence of clear direction, you're not going to be kind of guessing what we want and taking positions.
All right,
that
so
doesn't seem unreasonable.
I think
to me.
so your position is known. You made a motion. We have
Second.
a second on that issue. Councilman Gates.
And I would just, I guess, clarify, maybe, because I think we clarified this, I don't know if it was 2 years ago or something like that, or last year was. I don't have a problem with our staff going down there and weighing or commenting during the stakeholder meetings what the ramifications could be to the city of Phoenix. The issue for me is for our professional staff to sign in at a hearing saying that the city of Phoenix supports Bill 1234, that needs to be approved by this council. But I don't think we should tie their hands if they want to go down and look, here are some issues that have been raised. For example, this relates to the police, and here is the perspective of the police, the fire department, whatever the case may be. I'm okay with them, doing that, but I would agree with your motion to the extent that it is, they may not sign in support or in opposition as the city of Phoenix without a vote of this council.
And I don't know if that was a motion, but I guess I am taking it a step further. I don't want them at those meetings basically piping up and saying what we would prefer or not prefer if they really don't know. We haven't given them clear direction. It goes beyond what you're talking about. For those who aren't aware, you can sign in favor or against bills, or even neutral if you want. You're right. I don't have a problem with them going to the meetings and saying, this would cost the city of Phoenix X number of dollars, and that would cause us not to hire 10 more police officers, or something like that. Statements of fact, statements, that I don't have an issue with. I do have an issue saying the council wants this, or Phoenix supports that, without really knowing. without us having a vote or a chance to weigh in. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think our constituents would want
So I
that.
think in my experience of the legislature, the issue really is that their bills start out in a certain form, and then bills change. And then bills change a lot at the very end. And at the very end, we may not have the opportunity to come back. So they have to decide, with certain amendments, will they still support a bill? Or with certain amendments, will Phoenix withdraw our opposition? And they won't have time to come back before this body. I'm trying to be a fair reading of what the vice mayor has suggested, is that if a bill gets amended and they don't have specific support from this body to continue supporting that bill, they have to pull back until they get, that's what he's saying.
That's a fair.
I disagree with that. I think that that would put us, it would tie our arms behind our backs in the legislative fights that actually occur down at the legislature, that in good faith they're going to come back before this body and seek change. If bills change, they have time to come back before here through the regular legislative process. That's going to happen. But towards the end of the legislative session, when all heck breaks loose, and we've all, you know exactly what I'm talking about, you've been there, that we should not tie our team's arms behind their backs so that they can't advocate on our behalf based upon the agenda that we provided and the principles we provided them, that would be changed. So I will be not supporting the motion as proposed because I think it would tie our arms behind our back.
Mayor?
Councilman Valenzuela, do you have something?
Yeah, I do.
Good.
So these are the guiding principles. I agree with these guiding principles, and I, for one, I believe we have I'm listening to the debate and the conversation, and I have no idea what it must feel like to be one of the professional gentlemen sitting at the table here who know their job very, very well, who have helped this city thrive with all of the additional funding year in and year out from a federal standpoint, protecting, in fact, going off of these guiding principles last year, the year before, plans to do it this year and next year. There's the same group here in Phoenix, led by Tom Remus. The InterGov office here at the city of Phoenix has the expenditure is $1.4 million in fiscal year 12-13. This is just the federal agenda with a return of $117 million. And now, I will tell you that I am just one member of this council who's done my fair share of advocating, and we have several on this council, but there's a difference between going over and advocating for something that I'm very passionate about, like public safety, for an example, UASI funding, the SAFER grant, COPS grant, versus doing this on every single issue down the line to collect $117 million in a fiscal year. I don't want to tie staff's hands behind their back. I trust we have a charter system in place. I trust the city manager, and the city manager, puts at his discretion, puts people in these positions, whether it's InterGov or the fire chief, police chief, aviation director, and so on and so forth, and we let them do their jobs. Now, I don't believe that a member of our InterGov team should go to the state and pick a bill that has not been discussed and simply just say, I'm going to jump into this fight, and by the way, the city of Phoenix takes this position. I don't think that should happen. But I will tell you also, I don't think any member of this governing body should be doing that. It's one thing to go and to advocate as an individual and say, as a council member, this is what I believe, but no one should be going there and saying this is exactly the position of the city of Phoenix because of the charter system, because of majority vote. I don't know how. I just want to be clear that no one should be doing that, whether it's a member of our InterGov team, any other city employee, or any one member of this governing body. I don't think anyone should just go and say this is the position of the city of Phoenix without something being discussed here.
All right, so thank you very much, Councilman. So now we have I guess Jim Waring's motion on his philosophy about about staff actions at the legislature. Councilman DeCiccio, you had seconded that motion.
I did, and I want to make sure we also add in the language, and I agree with Councilman Valenzuela on this. Nobody should go out there and promote that this is what the city of Phoenix wants without a vote of the whole body. I mean, and that's really what we're talking about, whether it's the council, because Jim and I go down there, and I've got 3 or 4 bills I'm already working on that wouldn't fit any of this part of this agenda, but at least 4 other bills. So at the end of the day, you don't want me going down there any more than you want staff going down there promoting it, saying this is what the city of Phoenix wants. You can go down there and talk about it as an individual council member. You can go down there as a staff person. But I want to also add in the language that Bill talked about. This is what we did last year when we passed it. We basically said that you can go in there and give the ramifications. I want to make sure that the maker of the motion is okay with that, that staff can go do exactly what they did last year, give the ramifications of each of the bills to the impact of the city of Phoenix, but that making it clear, until I read something, I can't support it. I'm not going to support something, allow staff to go out there and ask the state of Arizona to do something without me reading it. I think it's just ridiculous to think that. We've already seen what happens at certain other levels of government when you don't read what it is you're voting on. And I want to be able to read it. I want to be able to know it. I want to be able to understand it. So if we could add that little part in there that Bill talked about, it's the same thing we did last year.
And to Councilman Gates's point, please remember, you can sign in as neutral. You can still give testimony. You can give factual statements. I don't think that's tying our hands. We just don't want you taking a position unless we at least know about it. We can find out about this stuff after the fact, which I just think that's
Okay,
just not
so
what my constituent wants, I don't think.
All right, so we have Jim Waring's motion on his advice about how the council professional staff should proceed down to the legislature. We have a second. Can we do roll call?
Councilman DeCiccio?
What's the motion here? Because I know that there's been a couple things discussed. So can we clarify?
Okay, so we're I'm trying to be fair to everyone here. We're in a spot, okay? The spot is that we have a legislative agenda per se. I don't think it's fair to have this professional staff walk out of this room without clear direction from this body about whether or not, if they're in a position down at the legislature where they're not going to be able to come back to this body and get specific direction, are they able to use their discretion about involvement? Councilman Waring, Vice Mayor Waring, I think in good faith has suggested that if they don't get specific direction of this council, they should not be involved.
Well, they can be involved. They can sign neutral, they can give factual, like I said, budget analysis or whatever. They're just not picking a side saying we're supporting this or that. They're still involved.
Okay. So that's great. The issue that I had presented is, as bills come forward, they get amended at the last minute. And I don't understand under that philosophy, maybe you tell me that, if a bill gets amended last minute, in that last week, that crazy last week at the legislature, and they're not able to come back before this body, under your direct, do they have the opportunity to say whether the city still supports it or not, or if there's any amendments, they cannot continue to advocate for a bill?
Well, I guess I will say I am not comfortable at all. Apparently you are, with them, taking a position on our behalf without us even knowing that it's happening. I guess I'm extremely uncomfortable with that.
So, Councilman Valenzuela, that's what I'm trying to get at is, I don't want to walk out of this room without them knowing what their authority is. That puts them in a no-win situation. It's unfair for us to do that to them. I detected that there was a distinction in that regard, and I want to make sure it's clear that we give our professional staff the best guidance we can so that they can do their jobs to the best of their ability. And they want to do their jobs at the direction of this council. I think they want clear direction from this council on that issue. So that's why I'm saying that's the real issue is that we're having this debate now, but the real issue is at the end of the legislative session when things move quick and they won't have the opportunity to come back here. Do we want to allow them to use their discretion? Typically we have. Throughout my entire time in leadership here we have, but it sounds like there's a disagreement among this body about whether we should continue to do that.
Well, last year it changed. We even had a motion. I mean, last year I thought worked pretty well, and I think that's just a reaffirmation of what happened last year, Mayor.
Okay, so does that answer the question about where I think the motion is about, Councilman Waring has put forward his to make it specific for direction, but whether we want to give that direction to our staff. So we have a motion. We had a second on Jim Waring's motion. Roll call.
Councilman DeCiccio. Councilman Gallego.
No.
Councilman Gates.
Yes.
Councilman Noakowski.
No.
Councilwoman Pastor.
No.
Councilman Valenzuela.
No.
Vice Mayor Waring.
You guys have really hurt my feelings. All right, I'm going to vote yes. Being on the losing side, I'm not comfortable with advocating responsibility to staff in this fashion. I just don't think that's appropriate for elected officials.
Councilwoman Williams.
No.
Mayor Stanton.
No, so the motion fails on a 6-3 motion. Okay, now we said we're going to split this legislative agenda into two parts. The first was the overall principles. At Vice Mayor Waring's request, we're going to now do a separate vote on the underlying agenda. Councilwoman Williams, is your motion to support staff recommendation on the remainder of the state agenda still apply?
These four.
Mayor, are you referring to where they delineated 1, 2, 3?
Correct. Now we're
group?
dealing with the state agenda, not the guiding principles, but the substantive recommendations from our professional staff as to whether we give them direction to pursue these bills.
Mayor, I would make the motion that we approve the report as given today with the exception of 3 neighborhoods and discuss that separately.
Pulling out the neighborhood item. Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Would you like to make a motion on the neighborhood item?
Actually, I would move approval.
We have a motion in favor of the neighborhood item. This is the
Second.
graffiti item. We have a motion. We have a second. This is the recommendation coming from the graffiti task force chaired by Councilman Noakowski and Councilwoman Gallego. Councilman DeCiccio, you have a question on the graffiti item.
I want to make sure, this is the one where the city of Phoenix wants to impose the rule that we have here, similar, a hybrid, on other cities that have not agreed to this, right? I want to make sure I understand that.
The recommendation is coming out of the task force, but I believe.
I'm okay with it, but I just want to make sure that this is what I'm voting on, is that this is the hybrid law which imposes the city of Phoenix's mandate on other cities throughout the entire state that don't have this law.
Mayor and Councilman, again, this was an item that was brought up through the task force, and so staff is presenting that because it came out of a citizens-led task force, the Phoenix model, the hybrid.
Okay, so again, it's the one where City of Phoenix developed it, and we want to make sure that every city in the state has this rule, correct? That doesn't have it.
Mayor and Councilman, if this were to be successful, then it would apply statewide.
Okay, thanks, Mayor.
All right, so we have a motion in favor of the item.
Clarification on that.
Councilman Noakowski, please. You're
What
the
we're
chair of the
talking-
committee.
What we're talking about is spray paint, that anyone under the age of 18 would be able to buy spray paint without their parents' permission, and that we would have it locked up so that it couldn't be stolen in our stores and hardware stores. That's the portion that we're trying to mandate on other cities. And what we're finding out with our subcommittee is that you can walk across the street to another city or another town and actually purchase these products, and the stores just across the street on the Phoenix side has them locked up. Thank you. Just clarification on that part of it.
All right, so we have a motion in favor. We have a second. The chair of the committee has made it clear what the proposal would do. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next. Oh, there was one no. I apologize.
That's all right, that's all right. I'll say it louder, I'm sorry.
No problem. So it passed on an 8-1 vote of our council. Next item is the federal legislative agenda. Do we have a short presentation on our federal legislative agenda?
Mayor, council members, though we have a 48-page report, we will have a very brief federal legislative agenda for you. The actual agenda is the first 7 pages of this large packet, and for reference for those who are interested in perhaps pulling items out to vote on separately, we've tried to have it where you could have the Roman numeral, the letter, and then the number. So if there's something specific under each of the sections that you would like to vote on separately, we try to indicate that. We've also included page numbers throughout. With that, before I turn it over to James Orlowski in our office to talk about those federal items, we do have two federal guiding principles, and those are promoting fiscal sustainability and protecting local authority. Two guiding principles that we've carried with us throughout the years. With that, let me turn it over to Mr. Orlowski, who will start with our first item under the federal program.
Great, thank you, Tom. Mayor, council members, James Orlowski with Government Relations. As you know, our federal legislative agenda is broken up into 4 issue areas. We have transportation, public safety, community development, and then water and environment. And in the interest of time, I'll just go through and briefly summarize some of the highlights and then happy to answer any questions that you have. In regards to transportation, this includes our streets, public transit, and aviation departments. And one of the big issues that we talk about each year when we talk about our transportation legislative agenda is surface transportation reauthorization, and this really overlaps both streets and public transit. And what we're looking at in this regard is for increased investment in infrastructure as well as streamlining. And we also want that federal funding that comes from the federal government to come directly to cities or to local councils of governments where decisions are being made at the local level. There are also large capital projects that we talk about in our federal agenda, both on surface transportation as well as capital projects at the airport. These are large capital projects and ones that really benefit from having federal funding to help advance those projects forward to completion. Other things that we're looking at for in this area are for Congress to restore the alternative fuel tax credit. It's very important to the city based on the size of the fleet that utilizes alternative fuels, as well as for funding solutions for the Highway Trust Fund to prevent insolvency issues that have plagued that fund in recent years. When we talk about aviation, we work very closely with the Federal Aviation Administration in many regards, and one of our priorities is making sure that no unfunded federal mandates are handed down from the federal government that would impact the city and the airport and cause us to have to make budget reductions at the city level. We're also looking for increased customs and TSA staffing. That's Customs and Transportation Security Administration staffing at Sky Harbor, which is especially important when the airport's trying to attract more airlines and more international flights to Sky Harbor. That's an important component. Also under aviation, I just wanted to highlight, we do have an item in there regarding FAA and regarding the public input process. And essentially, we think it's important that the FAA, when they're proposing changes that would impact the city and impact its residents, that there should be a public comment process and ample opportunity for the public to weigh in on those changes that are going to impact the city and its residents. With that, I'll go and move into our public safety portion of our federal legislative agenda. And when we talk about public safety, the majority of what we're talking about are competitive federal grants. So for police, it's such things as the Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS grant. When it comes to fire, it's things like the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program, or AFG. And it's also the Urban Area Security Initiative, or UASI grant, which deals with emergency management and public safety, specifically Homeland Security. It's a really important source of funding for the city to not just maintain the city's Homeland Security resources, but the entire region as a whole as well. I also wanted to highlight for you that we do have a component of police technology enhancements in our federal agenda, and specifically what we're looking at are a series of specific requests that the police department has for increasing police technology enhancements, and specifically such things as on-body cameras for police officers. Those are things that we look for funding opportunities for throughout the year, and if there were opportunities to apply for grants, then city staff would come back to this body to ask for permission to go ahead and pursue those funding opportunities. Also, in our public safety portion of our agenda, we do have an item dealing with flood recovery efforts, and in light of the presidential disaster declaration that the state received, just going forth and looking for funding opportunities that are afforded to the state and to the city as a result of that disaster declaration. Finally, we do have the same statement that was adopted by the City Council last year, encouraging Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform, which again is consistent with the past position that this body has taken. And I just also wanted to highlight for you that as that conversation sort of evolves during the upcoming Congress in calendar year 2015, we would look to bring back any specific legislation to this mayor and council to get further input and make sure that you're comfortable with what that legislation looks like as that conversation evolves. Our third issue area is community development, and in the issue area of community development, we're really dealing with a lot of social services and community development programs. That includes the Community Development Block Grants, or CDBG, as well as funding for housing programs, funding for services such as the Low Income Emergency Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. And these are all very important programs that tend to assist low-income residents and members of the vulnerable population here in Phoenix. And those are programs that we do look to each and every year to either ensure stable funding or even increased funding to really benefit the residents of Phoenix. I did want to say, with regards to programs like CDBG and LIHEAP, a big concern that we have each and every year is sort of ensuring that Phoenix is getting its fair share when it comes to the entire country as a whole. You know, there tends to be a funding disparity between older communities and fast-growing central cities like Phoenix, and some of these older funding formulas tend to advantage other East Coast cities that have different climates and different needs compared to Phoenix. And so that's a battle and an issue that we monitor each year, is making sure that the city is receiving its fair share of federal funding. One specific example in this regard is with CDBG funding, again, the Community Development Block Grant. In the past year, the city has worked with congressional leaders, specifically on the House Appropriations side, to press the HUD Secretary to develop CDBG reform legislation that we're hopeful HUD will include in its budget and in its reauthorization language this year, that would assist cities like Phoenix that are currently disadvantaged by the allocation formula and help us to get a fair share moving forward. It's similar when you talk about LIHEAP. For the last couple of years, what we've tried to do is pursue a strategy where we're developing coalitions and alliances with other similarly situated cities, whether it's cities in the southern parts of the United States or just other cities here in the Valley and in the state, working to combine efforts and form coalitions with those other cities, again, to ensure that everyone's receiving their fair share. Also included in the proposed federal agenda is support for the Marketplace Fairness Act. As I'm sure you all know, deals with remote sales tax collection and ensuring that state and local governments can enforce existing local sales and use tax laws on remote retailers. And our final issue area, which is water and environment, this includes water services, Office of Environmental Programs, Public Works, as well as our Parks and Rec priorities. And a big part of what we're looking at is, you know, we work really closely with a lot of federal agencies, whether it's the Bureau of Reclamation, Department of Interior, or the Environmental Protection Agency. And a real focus of the water and environment portion of our federal agenda is making sure that as federal agencies are coming up with federal regulations or proposing changes, you know, a lot of federal regulations, frankly, are written for other parts of the country. There are certain features to Arizona that tend to be unique, whether it's our dry riverbeds. You know, we have drinking water issues that, frankly, differentiate us from other East Coast cities, and so we want to keep that dialogue with federal agencies and the ability to work with them just to make sure that they understand the uniqueness of the state and the Valley as those proposals are moving forward. Some of the specific issues that we deal with in the water and environment section include waters of the U.S. and making sure that the proposed rule on waters of the U.S. doesn't negatively impact the city. As that rule is currently written, it appears to substantially increase the areas that are subject to Clean Water Act jurisdiction, and that, of course, could have cost implications for the city. And so we'd look to have dialogue with the federal government as that process moves forward. Another item deals with Colorado River resiliency, and what we're seeking here is the ability to work, again, with stakeholders like the Central Arizona Project, Department of Interior, Bureau of Reclamation, and specifically pursuing federal legislative and or funding solutions to promote Colorado River resiliency. Finally, the last item under the heading of water and environment is dealing with the property at the northeast corner of Central and Indian School. And specifically here, we're again looking to continue working with stakeholders, which include the tribal communities, as well as various federal agencies, specifically the Department of Interior, and with the goal of transitioning the property there to a use that, one, benefits the tribal communities, who really rely heavily on the funding specifically for education that's generated by that property, and two, just ensuring that whatever the outcome of that property is, that it contributes to the surrounding community. With that, that's the end of my prepared presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Tom, but we're happy to answer any questions. We're looking for your guidance on the proposed federal agenda.
Thank you very much. I do have one card on this item, if they are still here. Dawson, Day Dawson, is that the correct pronunciation? Thank you. You had a comment regarding body cameras funding. Yes. Come on down.
Would it be acceptable for me to say a little tiny bit about water also at the end?
You may. Yep. You've got 2 minutes, so whatever you want to say.
Wonderful. Thank you, folks, for letting me speak. With the United States right now in the spotlight regarding police brutality, I think it would really behoove us to move forward with putting body cams on our police officers. Currently, the United Nations Committee on Torture is seeking an investigation into what's happened in Ferguson. With the death of Romaine Brisbane last week, it puts Arizona even further in this focus. This puts a tremendous degree of protection for our people, for both police officers and for people that are out in the streets. I was a peaceful participant in the demonstration on Friday night in downtown. Our media tears us apart. It was a peaceful demonstration. There were over 300 people at that demonstration. It was a minority, but there were police officers who were trying to incite conflict with the demonstrators who were peaceful. And I know that there's been other things that have happened in the past that were not this case. We were peaceful. We had our hands up. And again, this is not just to protect people, demonstrators, First Amendment. This is to protect our officers. This is blood. This is not about.
So your recommendation is that we pursue federal grant opportunities for body cameras?
Please, for the body cameras, for all of the state of Arizona. And as everything that we can do to protect the water in Arizona is huge. There's been a lot that's happened with our political officials appointed, specifically Clint Hickman. He and his brother have opened a 12 million bird factory farm on top of a clean volcanic aquifer in Tonopah, Arizona.
So your goal is to keep us to pursue as many clean water.
Please protect that. Please
Thank you very
protect
much. I appreciate that.
It's extremely important, and
for your
anything
testimony.
that can be done to protect that aquifer before it's poisoned would be
Thank
huge.
you.
This is a huge community.
Mayor?
And it's clean
I
water.
want to ask her a question because I can't allow you to call our police officers names without asking you a question. This whole police brutality thing, are you talking about the police officer that walked across that little tightrope area to save that little girl that was hanging on a 4-story ledge? Is that what you're talking about when you're saying police brutality? Is that the brutality you're talking about?
No.
Which brutality are you talking about?
My personal experience in the downtown event on Friday night was I had an officer come over a wall in full riot gear and land in front of me so solidly and so affrontly, ready to push back on me, that had I gone, it would have fogged up his riot shield.
Well, let's remember what our police officers really do, and I am going to challenge you on this, and I'm going to challenge everybody else on this.
I'm saying this is
They're
for the
out there
protection of our officers.
Ms. Dawson, the floor is to Councilman DeCiccio.
Yeah, I'm a full supporter, and I believe that we ought to have body cameras because I think it's a good thing to do because it also allows us to see what the citizens are doing out there. It puts them on check as well.
I agree.
There are some issues on that dealing with how you store the evidence, how it's presented. I want to make sure we're not, keeping records on everybody either. But I mean, there's a good model in the state and the city of Surprise. But the other part of it is I really think, and I'm going to challenge you on this, is the language you are using is as bad as what you're describing the other side is doing. When you use the words police brutality, that tells you and puts a blanket statement over our police officers. And I think that that's just wrong.
Well, right now the United States is in a global spotlight.
I'll give you the opportunity, but
go ahead.
Councilman.
Well, we're in a global spotlight. The United States is in a global spotlight regarding police brutality. The United Nations Committee on Torture is investigating what happened in Ferguson.
I'm just telling you the words you're using are insightful.
And with the death of Romaine Brisbane last week in Phoenix, it puts us very much in that limelight. And to be able to have this transparent accountability for all of our officers really can't do anything but protect everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Dawson, very much for your testimony. So her suggestion is that whoever makes the motion on our federal agenda maybe add a statement about pursuing grant opportunities for body cameras, which I do think the Department of Justice is going to be, my understanding is that there are going to be some new grant opportunities for local law enforcement for body cameras. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Dawson. Do we have a motion on the federal agenda? Vice Mayor.
Let me ask, there's an item in the white sheets on page 8. It's the first bullet point, support increasing the PFC from 450 to 850. But that's not highlighted in the green sheet, which I believe is what you would prefer as the motion. So how do I pull that out, just that specifically?
Wait,
Mayor, Vice Mayor Waring, I think if you pull out item Roman numeral 1A1, which is supporting Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization legislation that reflects city priorities, or if more specifically you want to add in there pulling out the item related to PFCs.
All right, so we'll hold out the PSC item. Any other items you want to hold out, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, so I move the agenda except for item 1A, the part about support increasing the PFC from $4.50 to $8.50, et cetera. Also, item 2D, 3B, 3F, and 3C, items 3, 4, and 5.
wait, yeah.
All right, I'm sorry, did I? 2D is comprehensive immigration reform. It's on page 4 in the middle.
You're in the green sheets. He's on the green.
sheet.
I'm sorry, I'm back on the green sheets, yes. I'm sorry, there's two different.
Yeah, it is a little confusing. Thank you.
Um,
All right, so he asked him to pull out 2D. Go through it again, Vice Mayor?
Yes, I will. All right, so it was 1A, just the part about
Yeah,
the
PFC.
increase. Okay. 2D, which is, like I just said, the comprehensive immigration reform, which is on page 4. 3B, which is the housing item. 3F, which is the remote sales tax collection. And 3C, items 3, 4, and 5, which is on page 5. So not all of C, just 3, 4, and 5.
3C. Say the last part again one more time. I'm sorry.
3, 4, and 5. There are numbers inside of C on page 5. I'm sorry, this is just the way it's numbered.
3C.
So in the middle of page 5.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it.
There's
Okay,
human
all right.
services, and then there's a subset,
Okay.
1 through 5, and I'm holding
Okay,
out
so
3,
that
4,
is the kind of omnibus motion on our federal agenda. Do we have a second on that motion? Second. Any comments on the omnibus motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next, we'll move to the 1A, which is the PFC item, the staff's request that we have authority to increase the PFC. Do we have a motion on that item?
Mayor, I would make a motion to approve staff's recommendation on 1A, 2D, 3B, 3F, 3C, 3, 4, and 5.
So everything, all the stuff that Vice Mayor left out, the motion is in favor of. Councilwoman Pastor?
I have a question about 5. A5. I guess that's how we would read it. A5?
Wait, real quick. We have a Councilwoman Williams motion. Do we have a second on the Councilwoman Williams motion?
Second.
We have a second. Okay, so Councilwoman Pastor, you had a question? Which item?
A5.
A5?
Yes.
On page
What's the
3?
nature of the issue?
It's the FAA one? Am I reading this right?
Oh, that's the PFC item?
I don't
No.
know.
Oh.
I'm like, that's why I'm confused on how we're doing this.
Okay, so there was an attempt to do an omnibus on as much of it as possible and take out the items where there is a likelihood of
I took out the
disagreement.
part I didn't like.
I
That's the
know
way
you
it
Well,
is. So, yeah.
what's the item you're concerned about? We'll try to figure out from there.
Okay, I think it's 1A, is that right?
5, the FAA rulemaking process.
Yes.
Where's
Okay,
that?
got it.
I'm lost.
You have a question on that?
Okay.
This is on page 10 on the white sheet.
It would be-
Bottom of page 10, the FAA rulemaking process. Councilwoman, go.
Yes. Are you here? I'm reading here, yeah.
Yeah,
And then
she's
it's-
actually on page 3 of the green sheet.
Right. And A, and then subset 5 on A, on
Yeah.
top of page 3.
Okay, so it's page 3 of the green sheet on top or page 10 of the white sheet on the
Correct.
bottom. But the FAA rulemaking process that would require them a public comment process when proposing restrictions on airports, including departure path procedures. Councilwoman, what's your thoughts on that?
So my understanding on all of this is that Congress is the one who implements this or puts this in an omnibus or in a bill. How would you go about doing this? Because we're one city, and how would we align with other cities to request this? How would this go about moving forward?
Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, if I could ask for any of our aviation staff who might be available. I think this is going to be the topic of discussion at your special policy session next week. We'll be talking about how to interact with the FAA, how to interact with Congress in order to address these issues. And I know Tammy Fisher and I had a brief conversation this morning.
Tom, just for some clarification, for my colleague, on October 21st, we had a policy meeting, and I asked that we look into advocating that the FAA has some type of community outreach, and that we ask our lobbyists in DC to look for other cities and to partner up to look for ways to making sure that there is a line of communication, that communities aren't affected like what we were affected here in the city of
Without public
Phoenix.
process, without it being more public, yeah.
Correct, and that it's transparent. And that's what we actually asked for. So if you look on the last page, I think
10 or 3 or?
on the very, very last page of your report, the minutes of the
Oh, no,
last meeting, that's kind of explains everything there.
No, I'm aware of that, but there's a whole process, and the city of Phoenix just can't go in and say, oh, we want a rulemaking process, and we want public hearings. There's a whole other dynamic of doing that, and how would we then align with other cities and groups so that then they hear us? That's just, I mean,
All right, our legislative team, the contractual team isn't here, but our in-house team is here. So general overview of how we might go about building the coalitions necessary to get, obviously it's a big change, but building the coalitions necessary to get a change like this.
I'll turn it over to Aviation Director Fisher, but let me start off by saying I think that that's why we do employ our federal lobbying team, is to help us strategize and put together an approach in order to be effective and implement change and find other stakeholders, other communities that might be coming up to have this new technology implemented. And I think that's where we're going, but I think Ms. Fisher might have some additional insights.
Mayor and council members, I think you're exactly right, Councilwoman Pastor, that this is a lawmaking process, possibly not a rulemaking process that the FAA would do as an agency independently. So I think if it would be at the pleasure of the mayor and council, we could defer this item and address it in next week's policy session to craft better language for how we would pursue better public dialogue and communication as Councilman Nowakowski has requested.
Okay, so the request by staff is that we're going to have a special policy meeting on FAA-related issues, that we do the deeper dive on this issue at that meeting. Do you want to do it now, or you want to wait till next week when we have the FAA special meeting?
I'll defer to Councilman Nowakowski.
I mean, if
Okay.
What do you want to do?
we can do it next week.
Okay.
All right, so we will defer a deeper dive into FAA and strategy, and hopefully our contractual team, can, if they're not here personally, can at least be available to help deliver that message as well.
Mayor?
Councilman, please.
Yeah, just a couple things on some of the items that were listed in the omnibus, the second omnibus. One, I do like comprehensive immigration, but I like the one that Matt Salmon worked on. And I think that that's the one that's the most likely to get through, and it falls in line with some of the tenets that are listed in here too. It's one that Bill Montgomery, Tony Rivero, Matt Salmon, myself, some others support, including a group of many Hispanic pastors throughout the state of Arizona. It's more enforcement only, not enforcement only, but enforcement first type of policy. So you've got it listed in here, but I'm going to be voting against this omnibus just because of the fact that it's got some things in it that I think that are just going to be bad long-term for the city of Phoenix. When people talk about PFC, we use a lingo. What it is a tax increase on people that are arriving here. And we saw this happen with our water, or not our water, but with our street parking, where downtown we saw individuals complaining. Now people are not wanting to come to the downtown because of the parking meters hike increase. And by increasing this tax on people that are flying in. I just want people to understand you do have unintended consequences where people might start making decisions whether or not the Phoenix is too expensive for them to come into. Right now, I think we're near the bottom or one of the lowest, and that makes it attractive for people to come. So the idea of almost doubling that landing fee. So you're talking about, and what I want to make sure that people understand is our viewing audience, is that when someone's flying into Phoenix right now, they have to pay $4.50 to the airport. The city staff and some of the people that are going to be supporting this are talking about now almost doubling that fee, that's that landing fee and departure fee, making it even more expensive. And you have what's called unintended consequences. We saw that clearly with the parking meters downtown Phoenix, where we saw basically a revolt of individuals and taxpayers saying that this is ridiculous, we shouldn't be doing that. By even advocating this right here, you're sending a very bad message, I think, to the public. I don't, there's nothing in here that talks about where this money ought to go. It doesn't say that. It doesn't delineate it. Again, this city is now going to be voting on something where we don't have all the details on it. And I just think that we shouldn't be doing that until we're sure of what it is. So I'm going to be voting no on that omnibus motion. I think that that represents, I mean, how many individuals, we have over how many, 1 million people a year fly in?
Mayor, Councilmember Sal DeCiccio, this is about over 40 million passengers
40 million.
processed through Sky Harbor.
So what's the, I mean, can someone, I can do it right here on my phone, but what's $4 for $40 million? It's 160 million? About 100 or 1.6 billion? How much is it? We're talking about a tax increase that big.
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, Chad Makowski, Assistant Aviation Director at Sky Harbor. The PFC is an enplanement fee, so of the 40 million that process through Sky Harbor, approximately half of those are enplaning passengers or departing passengers, so that fee would apply to them. The PFC relates to a passenger facility charge. It's a user charge for people who use the facility. That fee has not been increased since, I believe, 2000, the year 2000. And so the airports across the nation are advocating for this increase to keep up with the cost or consumer price index related to constructability of projects and capital projects throughout the airports throughout the nation.
You're talking about an $80 million tax increase you're proposing. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, all projects related to the PFC increase would go through an application process where the FAA, the industry stakeholders.
I get that part of it. I'm just asking, the tax increase that you're asking for in this vote is about $80 million a year. Over 10 years, it's $800 million. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, I didn't do the calculation, but I would say that we're asking for your recommendation to move forward with advocating at the federal level to get
Not
this
what I asked.
ceiling increase.
I'm just asking you for math. What the tax increase is. Can you answer that, please?
It's approximately 20 million times the $4.50.
So it's about 80 million plus a year is what the tax increase is. That's what this council's voting on right now. That is a massive increase. Okay, thanks, Mayor. Just want to make sure everyone understood, including the viewing public, that this is a massive tax increase that's being asked for today.
All right, any other comments, members of the council? We have a motion by Councilman Williams on the remainder of our federal agenda. Do we have a second? I apologize.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
3 noes, so it passes on a 6-3 vote. Thank you for our legislative report, and now hopefully we've cleared up some of the issues relative to discretion that you may utilize as needed at the legislature. Next item on the agenda is item number 4, early cost reduction through vacant position elimination. This is part of what our city manager has tasked our assistant city manager to do. He gave the fun task to the new guy, so congratulations on that. So Mr. City Manager, if you could introduce the item, hand it over to our assistant city manager. I have to leave right now, but I will be appearing telephonically on this item and participating in the item as well.
Thank you, Mayor. And actually, we're going to do this between myself and Mario very quickly. Last January, we took a look at a 5-year forecast for the general fund. Go to the next slide. That strategic view allowed us to make good decisions to balance our budget. And the 5-year forecast also showed us that increasing employee benefit costs and sunset of the food tax were going to put continued pressure on our budget. So as a result, we all have together have taken unprecedented early efforts to stay on top of our budget. City employees put a tight squeeze on spending in June, saving $18 million through the end of the fiscal year. The council, with staff, reevaluated economic news and reduced our revenue estimates in September. Our employee contracts we negotiated call for a second-year compensation concession for 15-16. Today, we are here with early cost reductions through a vacancy elimination. You challenged us in the spring to take a look at our vacancies, ensure that they were necessary, and we have done that with Mr. Dahoney and Mr. Paniagua, and all of our department heads have done that. And so through those actions, we're here today to present that to you, and I will turn it over to Mr. Paniagua, our Budget and Research Director.
Thank you, Ed, and good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Based on that context and the budget challenges that the city manager described, your charge to us was to reduce costs and take a strategic look at the vacant positions that could be eliminated with minimal impact to services. And the city manager instituted that core process to do that in-depth analysis of department operations, including that review of the vacancies. We looked at only civilian vacancies in the city, so no sworn fire, no sworn police positions were included. It involved a strategic approach, and again, minimizing that service impact. We looked at vacancy rates over multiple years in departments, budgeted vacancy savings, department size, the number of facilities managed, and vacancies used to offset other costs like temporary agency staffing or contractors as stopgap measures. Council also asked us, though, to make sure that when we looked at the vacancies, that we minimize the impact to public services. That's a very clear principle that the mayor and council has put forth and has guided our actions as we move forward and prepare for 2015-16. As you can see here on this slide, the 5-year forecast that we presented earlier this year, about 11 months ago, showed without further actions, the city faced a deficit of between as much as $54 million and up to $14 million. So that long-term forecast has been critical to ensuring we reduce the deficit through proactive and strategic action that minimizes the impact to our residents. Since that forecast was presented, there have been some adjustments, as Mr. Zerker described, including a report from the State Joint Legislative Budget Committee in October, which showed reduced collections for state income tax in 2015-16. That's going to be about $7 million less than what the state had previously projected. So what we're talking about is a elimination of vacancies, about 181 vacant civilian positions. And we can see on this graph in the context of how that fits into overall actions that the city has taken in recent years. Compared to fiscal year 2007-2008, the city had 17,500 positions in place. After these positions are eliminated, we'll be at 14,400, so about 3,100 positions less due to service reduction actions, efficiencies that have been taken, organizational review, and the core process. On a per capita basis, and as we see how this compares to years past, decades past, the city will now be below the levels that we saw in fiscal year 1970-1971, when staffing per 1,000 residents was 9.7 FTE. It's now going to be 9.5 FTE per 1,000 residents. Given that the positions are currently unfilled, the level of service from this action will not change from what is actually being provided today. However, in the long term, there will likely be a noticeable difference in things like turnaround times and maintenance cycles, noticeably different from what they once were. For example, longer street maintenance cycles than in past years. Parks maintenance may be delayed as compared to years past. City staff may not be as able to respond to requests from the council or community as quickly or as effectively as in years past. So overall, the capacity to handle unusual events is not as robust as it otherwise would have been if these positions were filled. But having discussed these issues and the budget situation that we're facing looking ahead, these vacant position eliminations represent the least impact to services. Again, no current employees will lose jobs. These are all vacancies. None of the positions are sworn police or fire positions. No city services will be halted. No facilities would need to be closed. Staff requests City Council approval to eliminate 181 vacant civilian positions. 162 of those positions are in the general fund. The savings will occur in the current year and next fiscal year, as shown on the slide, that will contribute to reducing the deficit projected for 15-16. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Mr. Nowakowski.
You know, I was looking at the list. We got a list and it describes department and job title, but it doesn't say how long these jobs have been vacant. Do you have any idea of what's the norm of the vacancy for these positions?
Yes, Mayor, and Councilman Nowakowski. Overall, of the 162 vacant positions in the general fund, about half of those are a year or so or more older. About 40 of those are between 6 months and a year old, and the remainder, about 40 more, are less than 6 months old. So as the analysis was done by department directors, it wasn't just a factor of how long has the position been vacant. Department directors and management staff made professional recommendations based on their expertise, professional knowledge, and experience about which of the positions would have the least impact to service if they were to be eliminated. And that's what you see before you.
No, just some clarification. So no sworn officer or police officer or firefighter will be affected by this, right?
No positions are to sworn officers or firefighters.
And the other thing is that we're talking about 9.1 million up to 12.3 million for the following year. These were actually monies or budgets that were allocated for these positions. What are they being used for now? Are they actually being spent in those departments for department expenses, or are they actually just there in a bank or in their budget that's not being spent?
Councilman Nowakowski, yeah, this is not money that's being spent. This is savings that we would see. That it's because they're vacant, the funding is not being paid out to anyone, and so these are savings that we will see as long as these are vacant. By taking the action today, it ensures that we see this savings for this fiscal year, the $9 million in the current year, and then in 2015-16 on an annual basis and on an annual basis thereafter, it's going to be a total of about $12 million a year.
Let me clarify my question. So currently, is there actually that there'll probably be a $12.3 million savings because we're not using that funding currently for any position. So at the end of the year, if we approve this or we don't approve it, we will still see a savings because those are allocated for positions and they can't be used for anything else but for those positions. Is that correct?
Well, in the current year, so the $9 million that's budgeted in the current year for those positions, as long as those positions remain unfilled, yes, we would see the savings, assuming that those funds are not used for any other purpose. But the action that would be taken would actually reduce the estimate, the budget for those positions, and the savings that would be accumulated from those keeping those positions vacant and reducing the budget would be held for the purpose of offsetting that deficit that's projected for 2015-16.
And then the other concern I have is that we're talking about are we on the issue of that core? So on the core, I know that there was some cuts made to Channel 11, and as an individual that uses that service, I seen actually the service being reduced. A fine example is that we had a show for Halloween, and that show hasn't been aired yet because of the shortage of staff at Channel 11. So what I'm concerned about is that if I personally have seen a reduction in service, I just want to make sure that if we're going to go out there and cut positions, that the residents out there won't feel the same impact that I felt with Channel 11, and that we give fair warning to individuals out there if we are going to be cutting services, or if it's going to become library hours, or maybe parks, soccer fields that aren't going to be cut on a weekly basis or whatever, that we let people know ahead of time so they can prepare for those little hiccups that they'll have in the future.
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, we will look into what's the situation with Channel 11. That is not something that would be related to this vacancy reduction. We got to figure out what's going on, that shows date before Halloween for Halloween aren't on there yet.
Right.
This is a vacancy reduction that's otherwise, but we will look into the Channel 11 issue. And so, as Mario said, it does not affect library hours, as you said.
Well, I was just using that as an example, because once you cut that position, and we find out there's a need for a producer of a show, will we be able to bring back that position, or how would that happen? So I just want to make sure that we're not eliminating positions that we would have to use in the near future, or if there's a turnaround in planning and zoning that we need inspectors out there that will be able to turn around and hire those inspectors to deal with the demand that's out there.
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, that's a great point. The council does always have the authority to add necessary positions, and if we find ourselves in a place where we have the funds to do that, we would recommend and bring to you those positions.
Thank you.
Former Vice Mayor Gates,
Thank
you were furiously scribbling notes. Do you have something to share with the class?
Thank you, current Vice Mayor Jim Waring. A couple of questions on this. First of all, would anyone, if this item is approved by the council today, would any current employees be let go?
Councilman Gates, no. These are all eliminations of vacant position, would affect no current employees.
And it says here, according to these materials, that we would be eliminating 162 general fund vacancies, right?
Correct.
How many general fund vacancies would remain after this action? I mean, ballpark.
Ballpark, about 570 general fund vacant positions would remain.
And again, just as it relates to the general fund, this would have a positive impact on the budget of about 19.7 million when you take the two fiscal years together?
Yes, Councilman Gates, that's correct.
You know, to me, this seems like a very responsible approach to address a budget deficit that we know is out there, that you made us aware of months ago. We appreciate that, or I appreciate that. And this seems like a very responsible way to address it, as opposed to alternatives that could involve, you know, we're going to be closing these services and, you know, the community getting very worked up. And again, I appreciate this as a very measured way and to put us into a better position, because unfortunately the numbers that we continue to see are not rosy, but this takes that reality into account and positions us well for the next fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you, Mayor. And just following with Councilman Gates' question on this too, I think I submitted some questions to Penny for you, and falls in line with that. So there are 570 more vacant positions that this new budget's going to be funding, to the tune of 19.7 million. Is that correct?
Councilman DeCiccio, the $19 million is the savings when we combine 2014-15 savings with the savings that we expect in 15-16.
I got it. And then the 570 that are left, what's the value of those 570 that's going to be added into this budget?
That's not something I have at my disposal. I can get back to you on that.
That's
Councilman.
fine. Yeah, I'd be curious on that. And then of the 570, how many of those are police officers? How many are permanent? How many are temporary firefighters? You know what I mean? Do we have a breakdown of that as well?
Councilman DeCiccio, there are no police officers or firefighters in that 570. Those are all the civilian positions, and those are all regular full-time positions.
Okay, they're all full-time. And then do we have a breakdown of how many are temporary vacant? I mean, we have vacancies that are considered temporary too, right?
We do have a few temporary positions that are vacant, and we can get back to you on how many those are.
Yeah, like Parks has a few hundred that I think are out of that area just because of the the flux during the year. Is that correct?
Councilman
least what I
DeCiccio,
heard.
I think you're referring to maybe some seasonal part-time positions, lifeguards and those kinds of positions. We can get the information to you on how many of those we have.
What I'd like to do, thank you, Mario, is get a real big picture of exactly what the cost of all the vacancies are. Not, we can exclude police and fire. I don't think the council's is interested in that. I'd like to get an idea of police and fire vacancies too. If you could separate that, that would be huge. But I'd like to get an idea of what that is moving forward with the budget. The other is, and I realize you don't have it right now, the other is following with Councilman Nowakowski's line of questioning, which I thought was interesting, and I thought it was like really good, was the carryover. We obviously didn't fill all those vacancies, so that creates a carryover moving forward. Is that correct? Unless that money was used somewhere else. Was the money that we budgeted in last year's budget, what happened to that? Someone can...
Councilman DeCiccio, so the money that was, when you say last year's budget, do you mean 13-14 fiscal year?
Yes, 13-14.
So we did see some savings from vacancies last year, and that's really reflected in that $18 million higher fund balance that we saw at the beginning of the fiscal year for 14-15. So those savings accumulated from last year carried over and helped us in the current year. When we came to you in September, we talked about the need to adjust our revenue estimate downward by about $15.5 million. And that was mainly offset by those additional resources, those savings that we experienced in 13-14.
So basically the carry forward would have been the savings, 18, 15 million, whatever it is, the number that we came up with. Is that correct?
That's what carried over into this fiscal year, correct?
Okay, perfect. What I'd like to do when we get this picture, at least we'll get an idea of where we're at as a city, and how much is really included in the budget, that if there is another budget deficit, I mean, generally you only have several options left. One is, and this is part of the transparency part that we're talking about, looking at these bigger numbers that are in there that are going to be included in there. But when we look at this, and if we do have another budget deficit, which I think there is some level of projection that that's going to occur, at least we'll be able to know that there are some vacancies built into that. And I think it also is helpful to the labor groups and others too that represent, their members, to know that, one of the options you have are either cut people or cut vacant positions. I mean, there are options out there to do that. I think this is a step in the right direction. I want to thank Councilman Gates and Councilwoman Pastor for talking about this last year and moving it forward this year. I think that was a really good move to at least look at this and to look at some of the things. And I want to commend you as well with working with some of the labor groups. My understanding is you did that, to be able to work with them on it and come up with some idea. In the past, I mean, if you look at where these dollars really go, or not these dollars, where they go, the reason people don't want to cut vacant positions is because they see it as an ability to step up, or it's basically a safety net. If they get cut out of their positions, they were always able to move into the other positions. But we're not at that stage anymore. The world changed, the city of Phoenix changed, our economics changed, and the way we do budgeting has to change to fit the real world that we live in. So by doing that, by cutting these vacant positions, I think puts us in a step in a better direction. And if the city of Phoenix does need additional employees, we can always go to the city manager and say, city manager, we want to hire these 3 or 4 people. It puts that extra layer in there that really then says to everybody that you're going to have to go through another level of steps in order to hire more people moving forward. It makes you really think about what it is you're going to be doing, and it makes you think about whether or not you really need to add more employees, or if there's a better way of delivering that service. So I like the idea of this moving forward like this. I want to give everyone up here, especially this council members up here, a lot of credit for moving this forward, because without their support and without their movement and realization of where we are heading as a city, this would never have occurred. When you do that breakdown, could you also break down the vacancies in the enterprise departments as well? I'd just like to get a really good picture where we're at as a city, especially when it comes to vacancies. Thanks.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Councilwoman Pastor.
Mario, I can't remember when. It was such a crazy last 6 months. But I have in front of me the 92 vacant civilian positions that were given to us. These was where we finally landed that these were the 92 that we needed to protect, as we were told 6 months ago. These are the 92 positions included in this new document.
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor. So back in May of 2014, we talked about the fact that there were about 580 general fund vacancies at that time. And what we explained was that 20 of those were actually cut as part of efficiency actions that the council took to address the 14-15 deficit. For those that were not already in a hiring process or offsetting some other cost or being held open for budgeted salary savings or spending reductions, there were 92 that remained. At that time, staff did not recommend that those be reduced. And the reason was because there was no opportunity at that point to evaluate those on a strategic basis. That's why the city manager implemented the core process to occur over the summer and fall months that allowed that strategic evaluation of the vacancies. What also occurred during that time was there were some more vacancies that accumulated. In answer to your direct question is, are the 92 still in there? Those specific positions, some of them are and some aren't. Some of those positions were filled, and some of them continued to be held open as they were evaluated. All the positions were evaluated in light of the additional vacancies that accumulated over the summer, and that was the basis of the recommendations from department heads and their management teams that these 162 that we're bringing forward today are those that truly have the least impact to providing services to the public.
So the reason why I'm heading down this path is because looking at the ones that have been presented, there are only 29 out of the 92 currently that are part of the new list. So where I'm going is I'm gonna look at Parks and Recs. What I see in Parks and Recs now is that groundskeepers have been eliminated. So that's telling me that then are we outsourcing now currently our parks being, have we hired a company to oversee our parks in the sense of grounds?
Councilwoman Pastor, what this reflects are the service levels and maintenance levels that are being provided in the Parks Department as of right now. And so because these positions, these groundskeeper positions and other positions that you see on the list are not filled, this does reflect the service levels that we're providing today. At one time, these positions were filled, and that is why we discussed a little bit earlier that the maintenance levels in the Parks Department may not be what they once were with the elimination of these positions, but as of today, compared to what we're providing today, there will not be any drop off. And these positions do not reflect any outsourcing measures that are occurring. So these are just simply recognizing that these positions could be eliminated and are being recommended for elimination as part of the overall vacancy elimination today.
So then I guess my question is and I have a few more, how are we maintaining our parks then? These are 1, 2, 3, there are 6 positions that are being eliminated, and our parks are pretty big, and if you currently look at our parks, they're in need of, we're doing our best with what we have, but they still are in desperate need. So this is just kind of where I'm going with this. Our park ranger, there were 2 park rangers, there's 3 park rangers on here. There were 2 that were on the list. So obviously we saved a park ranger somewhere. the voice of the community was, we need more park rangers. We can't just do it on volunteers. So I understand that the park and everybody went through this whole feasibility study or went through the core, but I think we are going to eventually suffer in services. And where I really am looking at it is a recreational coordinator, because I'm assuming those are all the coordinations of our services in the sense of activities, after-school programs, all the different lights, the lights and parade, all of those things that everybody participates in citywide goes pretty much through the parks. And so I'm just saying I think it's good and responsible that we're looking at this, because we didn't look at it last time, in the sense of why didn't we just swipe the 92? However, there's only 29 that come from the original 92. So it got shifted somewhere in here. And there are also positions that are lower level positions. They're not necessarily the higher level positions that were in the 92. So it's just being cognizant, and I know you are being cognizant, but I'm just looking at it in that lens. In addition, I have two more. As we talked about the core, and it says core into next steps, here are my questions. Management changes that can be implemented in the short term, what management changes and when? And then policy organizational changes that require City Council, which will be brought to the skin primarily through subcommittees along with the Innovation and Efficiency Task Force. What subcommittees will it go through? And those are the two questions that I have on those. So,
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, we'll put together a full report on that. I'll just give you an example of one, though. For example, we have a city charter requirement that we have to write checks. It's a charter requirement that's from the days before electronic transfers of money. So we're going to come to Councilman Gates's Finance Efficiency Subcommittee in January to start discussing whether we want to have some sort of charter amendment that allows us to recognize in the charter electronic fund transfers, thereby eliminating a whole bunch of paper processing. That would be one example, but we'll get all the examples and put them together in a report. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Gallego.
We've been working with the Blight group very extensively and have a bunch of recommendations to deal with things like the many burnt-out buildings in the city that sit open, vacant, and attract crime. I guess I'm concerned about eliminating neighborhood preservation inspectors and what that will do, especially as I'm hopeful that maybe we'll be doing more in this area.
One thing I would say about this is, since these are vacant positions, that means that the work that they represent is not getting done today as we sit here, and some of them have been open for a long time. And what we're really saying is that it's our judgment that we can't afford right now to fill those positions and move forward with them, given what we believe is coming in terms of our budget decision making in the spring. So it's an acknowledgement that those positions, what those positions represent, we are not going to return to that until, as Councilman DeCiccio said, until we can identify specific money coming in that we can attach that to. So if, however, we get to the spring and there is funding, we have vacant positions, or the council can always add positions to do those things specifically.
Do any of these vacancies eliminate or reduce our ability to respond to flood-related infrastructure problems?
Councilwoman Gallego, I don't believe so, and particularly because, again, this is reflective of the workforce that's in place today, and so it wouldn't reduce our ability as compared to what we're able to provide in services at this time.
Right, but we have things like South Mountain Park is arguably it's one of the largest tourist attractions in the entire state, and there's real economic impact for having the major road closed for 6 months, and so we're eliminating street maintenance workers and parks workers, and I'm not sure that I've had enough time to study this and understand the impact, so I don't feel comfortable voting on it yet.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. How many of these positions would be considered management? What's the percentage?
I believe there are 3 of the positions that are at the management level.
It just seems out of proportion a little. Seems like that if we are reducing that many employees, it could impact more of the management level. Also, I have some concerns. I constantly, weekly, get messages and complaints about the condition of the parks or the condition of the streets or the street maintenance of the landscaping. And I have real concerns on some of these other positions. However, I understand fully that these are vacant positions and we need to be coming up with ways to conserve more money to address the deficit we're going to be facing very soon. Is there a mechanism that each department can consolidate data that would show us either, I don't know how quickly, but within a year, the impact of cutting these positions? Does it slow down their response? If so, how much? What types of conditions are pending that aren't being addressed in a timely fashion? Whether it's the street maintenance, it's a flooding maintenance, or something else that we face on a regular basis. I want to hear what the department heads consider the impact of this will be, and then compare it to what actually happens. My concern is we are cutting some positions that perhaps should be reevaluated, or there's some categories, classifications that we have in personnel that maybe could be expanded so that we could not have to have as many positions, but the same person could have expanding learning opportunities in the future to conduct the job and fill in some of the blanks. So, hear what you have to say.
We will do that. I think one of the things we want to try to emphasize is that if we didn't have a 5-year forecast that was projecting a deficit, we wouldn't be here recommending cutting any of these vacancies probably. We would be saying we want to move forward to fill them. But the reality is we believe from our projections that we potentially face a budget deficit. And so rather than coming in the spring with cuts to services the way we have done, we're saying that taking a look at where we have vacancies today, that cost reduction will mitigate what we might need to do in the spring. I think you reflected that in your comments as well, but I just wanted to emphasize that.
I just want to make sure that down the road we have an evaluation of what that cut impact was on service to the community. And it may be zero.
Vice Mayor?
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councilman DeCiccio.
Just a quick thing too, just to follow up on that. I mean, one of the things that we're still struggling with right now is the fact that we don't even have 500 officers. I mean, we can talk about every other department that we want, but any savings that you get, at some point you've got to look at what you're really short and what your true strategic functions are, you know, public safety, police, fire, you know, those types of jobs. So everything that we say we want is going to have to be balanced against what we really need and what we need on the streets right now, what we need in our neighborhoods. So as we look forward in this budget process, we really ought to be thinking about what is the very top thing that we really need to take care of first. And then we can move. And I know that it wasn't meant to be that way, because I think everybody thinks that there's going to be a shortage somewhere. But we ought to really look at what are those top things that we really ought to get done. And because the funding just isn't there to do it all. And this new world, this new economy that we're in right now, I mean, the fact is the city of Phoenix is going to have more revenue now than it ever has in its history. And its history is going to be coming up this year. And we're still talking about a budget deficit. That's a problem. I mean, it's a problem for us as a city. It's a problem for us as our citizens. It's also a problem when you look at the types of services you need to be able to fulfill as a government. So, you know, we can't cry poverty anymore because it doesn't. The public doesn't believe it anymore. We don't. You know, we're not poor. We just got to reallocate those dollars and figure out where we want to spend it. It's as simple as that. Thanks, Vice Mayor.
We have to prioritize, and I believe, as you do, that we should prioritize by hiring police officers first. Anybody else have a, yes,
I have one
Councilwoman
more
Pastor.
question. From here, new vacancies, are we putting that on hold too? So then in May, we may be looking at an additional set of vacant civilian positions?
Councilwoman Pastor, the intent is actually that the positions that remain will be filled, that those services do need those positions in place, to need people in place to continue to provide those services. Obviously, it does take time to fill positions, and so there's a little bit of a lag time in getting everything filled, but the idea is that overall, we would fill those positions and be able to fund the ones that remain.
So how many remain then? How many vacant positions are remaining?
In the general fund, it was about 570 positions.
Oh, there's five, okay. That's the 570 that are vacant?
That are vacant. After we reduce by the 162 vacancies, there will still be about 570 general fund vacancies.
Okay, so there's 570. Right now, in the next 4 months, people are going to retire, people are going to find other jobs. From those, in that category, are we going to hold and look at those positions to determine if those positions are then going to be white, I guess?
Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, as we move forward, every position that becomes vacant, we expect departments to assess and analyze those. But overall, what we're saying is, with this position elimination, we need to move forward in filling these remaining positions. Now, what happens, because this is so many, you can't do it overnight. It takes a while, and while you're busy filling this one, as you mentioned, people retire or move on. And that's where we have this thing called salary savings that naturally occurs and that we budget for. But what we're saying is, taking these out now, moving forward, we want to begin more aggressively filling these positions moving forward from today.
Okay, so I still am not getting the answer. I think I know what the answer is, no. But I guess what I'm saying is there are going to be additional positions that are going to be vacant. I want to know, or I would like to know, the process to determine if those vacancies are needed or not needed, and how crucial they are to the department. I also asking is, these 570 positions, when will they be filled? In the next 4 months, in the next 6 months, in the next 8 months?
Right. So generally speaking, if a position is filled today, it's critical. As you saw from that number, we've reduced 3,100 positions now. So if something is filled today, generally speaking, it's critical. But what we're asking is department heads to work closely with management, city management, and the budget and research department to just double check that it's critical moving forward. But our assumption is it is, and that we're going to fill it. It's hard to say how quickly we'll fill those 570 because it's a constantly changing number as people come and go and retire and leave and do those things. But it takes a significant amount of time, I would guess with you, 6 to 9 months, even a year, to fill that number of positions physically, just because we've got to recruit, go through a process of HR. It is not extraordinarily fast.
May I suggest that you fill those positions very aggressively before May or June, when we're going to be voting on a budget, and make sure those positions are filled? Because we will be back here once again speaking about vacant positions.
Of course.
And I guess I'm struggling with this, and I'm sure the general public's struggling with this. You're telling me there's 570 vacancies. In my mind, I think of 570. Tomorrow, 2 people may retire, so that will be 572. As you fill the 570, we have these other ones sitting and pending. So to me, they're not these ones, and I know it's different, but in my mind, Those aren't the priority right now. The 570 are priority to get filled, and these ones then get reevaluated to see if they get eliminated.
That's correct,
that's-
but generally speaking, so for example, if the chief financial officer left tomorrow, that is an extraordinarily high priority that would jump to the head of the line. I'm not starting any rumors, he's not, but it's an example of that's why we had this discussion earlier, is just because a position is vacant doesn't mean that it is either necessary or unnecessary. You have to look at it specifically for where it is and what function it provides. So we will never get to every position being filled, just because with 14,000 people coming and going, there's always some turnover, and that's what Mario accounts for in our budgeting with something we call salary savings,
Right.
just the natural coming and going and the time it takes to fill positions.
It's the natural progression. However, I'm still advocating to get them filled.
And we agree with that.
Ed, could you give us the website where people apply for the vacant chief financial officer position?
It's
No,
not
I'm just
vacant.
kidding. I'm just kidding. I shouldn't do that to him. He's probably
That's
getting
right.
emails right now. Hey, they're talking about you. No, I'm kidding. Anybody further? Here. All right. Is the mayor on the phone or Councilman Valenzuela? Would they like to say anything?
This is Mayor Stan. I am on the phone, and I had it on mute there. I apologize for that. And I thought it was an excellent presentation, a very thorough and thoughtful process. This is not easy in any regard, but the city of Phoenix has always been a very fiscally managed city. In fact, Moody's, one of our credit rating agencies, highlighted Phoenix for our strong fiscal management. Even during these difficult economic times, they pointed to us as one of our best practice cities. The willingness to make tough decisions to balance our budget each and every year was one of the characteristics of our city that they pointed to as to why we are such a strong, fiscally managed city. So no one likes the decision we have to make here today, and no one likes the process that we have to go through. But I do think that the process, in light of the difficult choice we have to make, was a fair process, and it's the right process for the city of Phoenix. And I'm supportive of the professional staff recommendation as the choice we have to make here today.
Thank you. Councilman Valenzuela, are you on the phone?
I am on the phone, and I agree. It's a tough decision. It's not where we want to be. I do commend the city manager for tackling this issue now and not waiting. This is something we're going to have to deal with and work through, I should say. I think staff made it clear why we have to do this now. And I appreciate all of the questions that Councilwoman Pastor worked through there. I think we all benefited. I think the viewers benefited, and I'm also supportive of this very tough item.
Okay, thank you very much.
One additional question.
Oh, yes, Councilwoman Gallego. Sorry.
Some of these look familiar. Like we have an item on here for Head Start positions, and at a formal council meeting, I think we reallocated funds from positions to Head Start programs. Are these any of these things that we've seen before?
Yeah, I think Councilwoman Gallego, we do have two non-general fund positions from Human Services. They're grant funded that the department is saying can be eliminated without impact to services. With regard to your specific question, have you seen these positions before?
Are these two additional Head Starts, or these we've already voted on?
These, I'll have to look into that.
Okay, everybody good? All right, Councilwoman Williams will make a motion, and then we have 3 cards from the public.
I want to agree with Councilman DeCiccio and Vice Mayor. I think this is a tough decision, but it's time to make priorities. And this is very important for us to have going forth into the budget time, because I don't want a repeat of last year. And I think getting ahead of it is extremely important. And police are, and public safety is a priority in this. As I ask, I would like to have some type of a report back saying if it had an impact one way or the other on eliminating some of these positions. But I would definitely move staff's recommendation as presented to us today. for approval.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. We have Marshall Pimentel, wish to speak. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mayor, City Manager. We're here again, efficiencies versus hardships. We know we have a lot of issues with the budget, but dealing with vacancies, we've had a lot of questions as far as, are we sure some of these vacancies, and I've heard a lot of questions on whether or not these are the right choices to make. We're gonna visit them again. Some of these items might be more costly in the near future. But when we're dealing with them, you know, we have a lot of issues such as in streets, which is where I'm from, traffic signals. We had issues with the last storm. We are down to 18 technicians versus almost 30. And we've had a lot of issues with, again, this is a public safety item, with getting these signals up, especially during the last storm, the big storm that we had, and it's a continuing problem. So we're trying to do more with less people. We need to get these people in and get them up to speed, and the training and the turnaround just to get them up there and doing the job that's needed so that we could take care of our responsibilities for the community is a big issue. Response times is one of the problems that we've had to contend with. We're getting a lot of complaints about taking care of certain things that the public is accustomed to when it comes to our signals. And a lot of those complaints have been in Ahwatukee, with them saying, hey, we have a lot of issues with the signals aren't working correctly. We have loops that aren't being taken care of. We have a couple of trades helpers that we're going to outsource. The city is filled with these. We have surveyors that are going to, on this chopping block, that the community relies on these markers that are going to have to be put back in just so that they could deal with their property lines.
If you could finish the thought.
Sure. And these are the issues that we're going to have to deal with. Unfortunately, you know, it is a tough decision. We know the direction that they're being directed to go, but if we could look at these and really make sure that these cuts are necessary, and are we going to have issues with them later? Is it cost effective? Thank you.
Thank you. We have Louis Schmidt, and we had Dan Ramirez, I think gave, I don't know if he's here, but he gave 2 minutes. I don't see him, so I'm going to assume that he did. So if you could add, give 4 minutes if you would. Thank you.
I've been here for a few hours, but thank you, Vice Mayor. City Manager, members of the City Council. When you look at the budget, when you look at these deficits, it speaks for themselves. So this seems like a good decision. Sometimes it's the only decision that has to be made, because at the end of the day, the City Council is tasked with making sure that everything runs efficiently, and the City Manager has to make sure that he provides a budget that, you know, delivers what you guys need. But one of the 2 weeks ago in Vice Mayor's, in Councilman Gates' subcommittee meeting that we had 2 weeks ago, we were going to talk, we were going to listen to HR make a presentation about the increase in workmen's compensation injuries, you know, the increase in the cost. Well, that's one of the indirect consequences, casualties of this low staffing levels in over 41 or 42 years now. When you're not hiring, your people are doing more with less, but that has consequences in the field. The employee who got hurt in Ahwatukee, Preston was his name, there was not a guide vehicle for him. Had there been a guide vehicle, that may have prevented that injury. Now, how much is that going to cost the city long-term with all the liability that's going to come out of that? When you don't provide the efficient staffing levels out in the field, it does affect services. It does affect employees. Unfortunately, we did have a suicide earlier this year here in Public Works. But when we don't, and that one, it's not totally because of the staffing levels, but when employees are doing more with less, you have impacts on employees. It's stressful when we're being tasked, do more with less. That is stressful on certain people. And unfortunately, this employee couldn't take it anymore. You know, and I'm not going to say here I'm not blaming it entirely on this, but there's impacts that these staffing levels are having on the employees, like what Mr. Pimentel just said. When I look at the sheet, you know, we at the last meeting we sat through for the Councilman Gates subcommittee meeting, we talked about having to improve all the communication systems for the city of Phoenix. You know, it's going to be very expensive. But here we're going to cut some positions in that department. For Public Works, you know, it's important to have sanitation out there. It's important to have all our fire trucks and police vehicles out there. But we're cutting more and more. And when we cut these positions, it does impact the level of service that we provide our customers. When the garbage isn't picked up on time like that, it does affect services. You know, so public safety is not just, you know, about, you know, sworn. You know, the make sure we have clean water, making sure that the signals are working, that the streets are, you know, clear. All that is public service. So, I mean, I know that the city manager is making this recommendation, but I just, you know, like many of you had good questions and concerns, but I just feel that the council needs to be, you know, given like a full report on why we're having such an increase in workman's comp, but it does correlate with the staffing levels. That you're making a dangerous situation for our employees. If it's going to take casualties to wake up to have you guys understand the severity of this, maybe I hope not. But I'm telling you that the more and more we keep cutting, the more and more it's going to increase injuries and hopefully not fatalities in the field. So I know that this is a conclusion that these are going to be cut. But I just, you know, I feel for the city manager because he has to do this, but the council is the one that, you guys are the policymakers. You guys are the ones that, you know, decide on the budget, and he's left no choice. And I don't like this, but I just wanted the council to be aware of the employees are getting injured, officers, police, you know, firefighters, everybody rank and file, because we are short-staffed. And by this decision, it will increase injuries and increase the workman's comp, you know, claims. So, thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. All right, we appreciate it. Any further discussion among the council? Can I ask who we still have on the phone? Because I heard a couple beeps. Do we know?
Daniel Valenzuela.
Bill Gates. Greg Stanton still on the phone.
So we have everybody. Okay, so this is a voice vote, correct? All right. No further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Nay.
So by an 8-to-1 vote, the motion passes. Thank you very much. I don't see any other agenda items, and you didn't give me a gavel. So you'll just have to take my word for it. Meeting is adjourned.